Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Thursday, September 9th, and today is our prediction show, but there's a lot going on that we're going to have to talk about before that.
It's such a small part about what this is going to be about.
Yes. Brian Kelly gave a press conference today. There was a lot of news that came out, stuff that we had learned right before as well, and some stuff that had been rumored. I believe it was Tom Loy that recently reported that Blake Fisher was going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. And Brian Kelly confirmed that Blake Fisher is, in fact, going to have surgery on his knee, so he's going to be out for some time. Shane Simon's out for the year. Lawrence Keys, he confirmed the report that we broke last night about him being off the team. They've moved Xavier Watts to Rover. That was not a decision that has been well received by many people. So there's a lot of negativity going on right now, which is very concerning. And there's a lot of problems at certain positions that is a very concerning. And obviously receiver being one, but this is where Clark Lee's mismanagement of linebacker recruiting has certainly come back to haunt them. Now, you can't say, well, you expected 3 guys to be out for the year by the first game of the year, before you get to the second game of the year, but that's why you keep recruiting, because you don't know what's going to happen.
You need depth. I mean, that's the whole point of recruiting. Right. I mean, you don't just recruit starters.
Right.
I mean,
and it's like when these players leave, it's like, so what? Be good riddance. Well, you know what? Notre Dame probably could really use Jack Lamb right now. You know what I mean? And
you and I were upset when that happened anyway.
Yeah. So this is a major problem for Notre Dame. This is why you can't whiff on a position group the 2020 recruiting class now has no receivers left. And no linebackers in it, because they whiffed on linebackers in that class. And the only linebackers, 5'11 and a half, 185, 190 pound guy named Xavier Watts. That's not going to be received well. So it's a problem. It's a problem. And you're not even in the second game of the year and you're seeing that. So, and then here's the other issue. Safety recruiting has been so poor under Terry Joseph that you don't really have any safeties that you can move down to Rover. That's a problem.
Because that's the easy switch, right, is to move a safety to Rover, or bring in an additional safety, or however that you fix the depth chart, right? But that doesn't exist as an option right now, and linebacker is so thin that's not an option right now. So they're pulling from a thin wide receiver room, and pulling over to the Rover position, which I just don't understand.
Because now the receiving core is your starters, right? You've got Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey, Kevin Austin. Right. You've got Joe Wilkins, You've got Joe Wilkins as your fourth. That's basically the rotation, right? I mean, correct. Is it Lawrence Keys and Lorenzo Styles were just used to give guys a couple breathers on Sunday night, right? That's your rotation. So it's going to be a short bench again. And then your next 2 receivers are what? Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles, and Jaden Thomas. And then walk-ons. And normally, if it was a normal team, I'd say that's no problem. Those are really talented freshmen. But this is a staff. This is a position coach that has shown he has no ability to develop freshmen.
Correct.
None.
Correct.
So I have no faith that he's going to be able to get those guys ready to go. That's a problem. And you're at a position group where 2 of your best players, your 2 best players, arguably, are guys that have not been able to stay healthy throughout their entire careers.
Correct. And you can't count on that. I mean, I'm sorry. Neither one of them has had a completely healthy season. And the only time Kevin Austin was healthy was when he wasn't allowed to play. Yeah. So he's not playing. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to stay healthy when you're not playing. And Braden Lindsey, for as good as he is, he just has a tough time staying healthy. And so you've got zero margin for error right now in the wide receiver room. Look, we all agree that when Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsey are healthy, they're great. They're great, and they make this offense great. But if, God forbid, anything happens, it's going to be a scramble. And I'm just not convinced that they're going to be able to withstand an injury to either one of those guys, which unfortunately I feel like is inevitable.
I mean, you're going to have to play a freshman, which, again, for a normal team, that's fine. Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey are top 100 players. Jaden Thomas is a 4-star caliber recruit. But it's this team hasn't shown the ability to do that. That's the problem.
Right.
So, it's
problematic. Right. I guess my biggest issue is pulling from a position group that's already light You know what I mean? Like that you can't come up with any other options except to pull from a light position group already.
Right.
And
it also tells me that they had no plans for Xavier Watts at wide receiver,
which is ridiculous to be.
You don't move a guy in that situation over to defense. And so basically what they'll probably do is they'll probably move him to rover this year just because they need a body.
Right.
Then try to convince him to play safety next year. So he basically loses a whole year of development at whatever position he's going to play. I can assure you that's not going to be received well.
Right. He's going to leave. I'm sorry.
I don't want to say that. I mean, that's just
that's my speculation. That's Vince's opinion.
Right?
I haven't talked to anybody. But if I'm in that position, if it's Vince that's getting jacked around like that, I'm leaving. And that's me. That's my opinion. Right. I just don't like the way this looks. And if I put myself in his shoes, I busted my butt. At one position, I'm not getting any playing time. You're going to move me to another position where I'm probably not going to get a lot of playing time. And then you're probably going to move me to another position where I'm probably not going to get a lot of playing time. Why am I here?
And now's the time he's going to have to make that decision because he's going to have to say, look, I'm going to redshirt this year because last year didn't count for him because of COVID.
Right.
He still has 5 years left. He could basically start over with the new transfer rule.
He can start over right now.
He doesn't have to sit out a year. He can basically start. He can say, "Look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what Keys did. I'm going to, get my grades where they need to be, and I'm going to transfer somewhere in the spring and a place that wants me." And that's a problem. And I talked to Xavier Bradshaw today. It says he's barely heard from Notre Dame, so it's not like they've got these other guys queued up. He says they have not talked to him about a date for visiting. Now, maybe that changes with after today, but
why did something like this have to happen, though? Okay, why does chaos have to ensue for you to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So that's where we're at with all that. I think the Blake Fisher news is obviously big.
Yeah.
I think that Notre Dame has some tough decisions to make, and unfortunately, I think they're just going to kind of plug in the next guy on the depth chart as opposed to thinking very long and hard about, do we need to reshuffle this thing?
Right.
Potentially moving Jarrett Patterson out to left tackle, moving Zeke Correll back to center, maybe moving Christophic back out to tackle, something along those lines. It sounds like they're just going to plug in the next guy and just move on is what it sounds like. But they're going to, and how does that go? Is Carmody going to be able to play that position? Are you going to be able to find out this week if he's capable of it? Next week against Purdue, you will. Against George Karlaftis, you're going to find out if he's able to play tackle.
Sure.
But then you maybe miss a couple weeks of potential development of somebody else at that position. So for a team that's a top 10 team and a team that's got a lot of expectations, things have quickly soured in a couple of areas. There's still a lot to be excited about, but there's a couple of question marks now because of injury, and that's part of the game. And this is why we've always said this is why you have to recruit better. This is why you can't have a two-man class in 2020 because it's Tosh Baker and Michael Carmody. It would have been nice to have maybe Jimmy Chris to choose from. Hey, you know what? You remember that Pete Skoronsky kid that's now a freshman All-American last year at Northwestern that Jeff Quinn didn't think was good enough to be a Notre Dame target until it was too late. They finally got on him late. He went to Northwestern. That might have been a good local player to get. He's from Illinois. There's just been a lot of mistakes on the offensive line from a recruiting standpoint, and they're paying the price now.
Yeah.
Because number one, the fact that you're now in the situation where you're playing Michael Carmody and because you never developed, Andrew Christophic, Quinn Carroll had his injury, but that was 2 years ago now. You haven't been able to develop him. You can't develop Tosh Baker. Those are issues. Those are issues that people a lot of people are unwilling to address, but they have to be addressed because you're starting to see the consequences of that now as guys go down because they don't have, like you talked about, you say, losing Jordan Johnson and Jay Brunell and Kendall Abdul-Rahman, no big deal. Those guys weren't going to play anyway. Well, might be nice to have a couple of those guys now. Maybe you should have handled some of those situations correctly. Maybe you should have, taken more interest in what was going on with Jay Brunell, and maybe you shouldn't have used him as a tackling dummy in practice every day. And maybe you'd have a guy like that. Not that he would start, but he'd give you some more depth, and you'd feel a little bit better about where you're turning to. Maybe you should have done that with Kendall Abdul-Rahman. Maybe you say, hey, look, again, maybe those guys aren't playing right now, but at least gives you more confidence in the depth chart, knowing that, hey, we've got these guys we can go to if we need be. Whereas now it's like, if there's an injury, it's like it's a freshman. Well, what if there's another one? I mean, as we've seen a linebacker, they've had 3 injuries now. If that happens at receiver, you're screwed. You don't have enough bodies. And you can't just say, well, go 12, 13. You just lost your number 3 tight end for 6 to 8 weeks. Right. So you've got 2 tight ends now that aren't true freshmen.
Well,
so it's not.
I'm gonna try to put a little silver lining on it. I'm trying
Please
to.
do, because I'm like, dude. Head, I mean, they're 1-0. They're ranked in the top 10. You know, like
in my head, I'm trying to think positive here, right? Because I could very easily go take a trip to negative town, as they say, right? I still think this team can be good. And here's the issue. Okay, I still think everything Notre Dame that we've talked about in the past, I think that's still all out in front of them. I do. The problem is your margin for error just got the air sucked out of it. There's no margin for error right now. And by margin for error, I mean basically injuries. And that's the problem. You can't withstand anything else. Like you've taken all the body shots that you can, self-inflicted or otherwise, and now that's it. That's what you got. You know, you're putting all your chips in the middle, and you're hoping that you don't get a bad flop on the river or whatever the poker terminology is.
Right, exactly.
Where you're at right now.
I don't know what the terminology is, but yes.
Right.
I get what you're saying.
But yeah, the point is, I still think this team can be very good. I do. I really do think that they can be good. But the margin for error is gone.
Right. If they don't have another injury at receiver, the receiving position is going to be fine this year. It's going to be loaded.
Sure.
I mean,
exactly.
It is. Right. Because they didn't lose a guy that we thought was going to be one of the top 3, right? You and I have talked about this. We didn't think that Lawrence Keys is going to start this year. We thought he should have played a lot, and they weren't going to do that. And it became very obvious in the last couple of days that they just – what they said all offseason to the players – not to us, to the players.
Right.
We're going to have a depth. We're going to play more guys. That was leading into game week. It was said, hey, you're not going to play much this week.
Right.
And then had the conversations. Well, you know, what's this, that? Yeah. Hey, look, you know, you're not going to play much. You know, I mean, after one game, that was the decision. I mean, I've never heard of anything absurd like that in my life. And then you're like, why is the kid leaving? Well, you just told him he wasn't going to play. Right. And you lied to him for months.
Right.
To keep him here, keep him here, so he didn't leave, and you know it's a mess. So yeah, again, Vince, with the exception of the offensive line, as long as there are no more injuries, they'll be fine.
Right, absolutely.
The problem is that like the offensive line, I'm concerned about because your true freshman was probably your best offensive lineman until he got hurt on Sunday, which says a lot because he was just relying on God-given ability. That wasn't a coaching thing. That was just him being that good.
That was just him being big and strong. And
now he loses out on 6 to 8 weeks of development time.
Right.
That's a problem.
Which, huge problem.
And you're moving a guy that honestly should probably be playing guard to left tackle. That's what you're doing. You're moving him. You're moving Michael Carmody to left tackle. That seems like a problem to me.
Yeah, so you're going to be lucky to get Blake Fisher back for USC, Northwestern, Navy, Virginia. I mean, he's going to miss. What's his conditioning
going to be like? Right, exactly.
And he's going to miss that big stretch where you needed a good offensive line, right? I mean, I don't personally. I mean, maybe he's a fast healer and all that, but to bring him back for North Carolina, and USC and things like that, I think that would be tough. That's going to be a tough entrance back into college football, right? An easier. Well, bring him back against Navy, then Virginia, Georgia Tech.
Hopefully, you can weather that tough storm, right? Man, which, as long as you don't have any more injuries, you can. Yeah. You can weather that tough storm. But we'll have to see. We got a super chat here from Lawrence Adams. Lawrence, thank you very much for the super chat. And Lawrence says this team will still be good. However, the lack of depth will likely get them during the tough 5-game run they have to make in the middle of the schedule. And that's exactly you're absolutely right. The concern that we have is they can't suffer another injury in the linebacker safety.
Correct.
They can't suffer any injuries at receiver.
Right.
That's it just can't happen. You don't have enough. You don't have guys, and you don't have a coach that. I'd say they could sustain another receiver injury if I felt there was a coach in place that could coach up young players. But how much time does Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey have to earn Dell's trust over the next 6 weeks?
So maybe this is a good thing because maybe they're going to have to play, and whether he trusts them or not, I don't think he's going to have a choice.
Right.
And maybe they'll go out and they'll impress and they'll be the guys that this team needs them to be.
Right.
Because his hand is forced.
Right.
Right. That's the only thing I can think of from a positive standpoint for those young guys.
And who's playing receiver next year?
Right.
They better hope they better hope Austin and Lindsey decide to come back for fifth seasons, because otherwise they're playing a bunch of freshmen or sophomores, which again, for a normal team with the talent that those guys have, wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
For this team that does not have a coach that's proven he can develop young players, it's a problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, and we have a couple comments here, Vince, before we get on track. Want to get the stupid questions out of the way, but is there any chance Keys comes back? No.
I don't think so.
No. That bridge has been not only burned, it had a Tomahawk missile fired from a battle cruiser, blew up. It's done.
Yeah, it's incinerated. There is no bridge left.
They could go back and beg him to come back, and I don't see him coming back.
Right.
Don't see it.
Yeah.
Nope.
I agree. Frustrating. This is 2 straight shows.
Right.
In the last
and here we go. So this is Georgia was stupid then at wide receiver against Clemson. I think they had some walk-ons playing. I think Styles and Colsing and Hang. Georgia scored 3 offensive points against
Correct.
Clemson.
With a really, really good
not
quarterback.
A great example, right?
Right.
Yeah, they scored 3 points. Remember, Georgia's only touchdown came on a pick 6.
Correct.
And not only did they score 3 points, they only threatened like one other time. They had a missed field goal, right? And that was the only other time they really threatened Clemson.
So if anybody's cool with 3 points a game, that's not cool.
And I don't think that's what he's saying. But,
right.
But, yes, look, and what he's saying, I agree with. In a normal situation, Notre Dame should be fine at receiver with guys like Lorenzo Styles and Deion Colsey and Jaden Thomas. They should be fine. No issues. And with Kane Barong at tight end. The problem, however, is at the receiver position. I don't feel this way about the tight end position. I think John McNulty is going to be able to get Kane Barong and Mitchell Evans.
I agree.
No doubt about that. But still, you're still relying on freshmen at a position where most freshmen don't play well, except when they're the freaky kind of guys like a Michael Mayer.
Michael Mayer, yeah.
But at receiver, they don't have a coach in place that has proven to me he can get those young, talented players ready to go. That's the problem, G.
Right.
And that's where I say, yeah, in theory, you're correct. If Brian Hartline was the receivers coach at Notre Dame, I'd say they're going to be fine. As long as they don't have like 2-3 more injuries. I mean, that gets absurd. I mean, you can't lose 5 guys from a position group in one season. But as long as they have more than one injury, they'll be okay, because Lorenzo and Deion can ball, and coach is going to get them ready to go. If Mike Denbrock was still here, I would, and Ryan Mahaffey, who was his GA, were still here, I'd say, yeah, I'll get them ready to go. They'll be okay. I'll get them ready to go. Because the few times we did see young receivers getting playing time and doing well at Notre Dame was under Mike Denbrock, not Dell Alexander.
I trust Mike Denbrock to do a lot of things. So
yes.
That's not really an issue at all.
Yeah. But Dell Alexander has never given me any sign that he's going to be able to coach those young guys up. So, again, we can't just say, hey, the talent's there. They're going to be fine.
Yeah.
We have to be able to be honest and I hope he proves me wrong, because they're going to need it, because those are talented players. And hopefully, you know what the dream situation is for me, Vince? Here's the dream scenario for me.
Okay.
Because these freshmen are now forced to be in the rotation, you have to play them, and they step up and ball. And you're like, hey, look, freshmen can play at Notre Dame at receiver. And they kind of make them change their mindset, or find a coach that can get those guys ready to go.
Right. Yeah.
Because in this era of kids can just leave like that, you have to do things to make kids happy. And that's twofold. Number one is obviously play them. But number two, the issue with Lawrence Key and some of these guys, it's not necessarily playing time. It's that you are not honest with them. They don't perceive you to have been honest with them. You told them one thing to keep them here and keep them happy, and then as soon as you get to the game week, it's completely different story. Kids aren't right. These are students at University of Notre Dame. They're smart, savvy kids, and I think sometimes these coaches think they can just give whatever
BS line,
coaching jargon they use, and think these kids are stupid. They're just going to buy it. This isn't Arizona State, right? This is University of Notre Dame.
Can I play devil's advocate here real quick?
Sure.
So your dream scenarios, they go out, they ball, et cetera, right? My worry that if that happens, that Brian Kelly is like, see, everything's great at wide receiver.
No, I mean, he's already going to think that, but it's gonna. What I'm going to say is it's going to make them realize that, hey, you know what, freshmen can play.
Okay.
Because Brian Kelly's always going to kind of have his head in the sand a little bit. So I get your devil's advocate point, but it's just if he still thinks that, but then still plays freshman, okay, fine. You got to take some good with the bad, right? Right now he thinks everything's fine, and he doesn't have a coach who can develop young players. That's the problem. So anyway. I
want to spin this to the defensive side real quick with the linebackers, because they've had 3 season-ending injuries from that position group, and that's devastating. I mean, it just is. And regardless of what you thought about Shane Simon, he was still a body. He was still a D1 linebacking body to help you out. And obviously Maris going down, so you got 2 guys at the same position, and Paul Mawala. While he was going to be a rotational player, he was still going to be a guy that they were going to count on.
Player,
yeah, absolutely. And so your depth is dead, at those 2 positions. And now, what is Marcus Freeman going to do as a position coach? I think that's a big question right now. Yes, they pulled Xavier Watts over from wide receiver. He's going to be at Rover. Jack Kaiser's going to learn multiple positions, it sounds like. Prince Collie is going to be probably a will now because he's second on the depth chart there after being there. Did you say Prince Collie was second on the depth chart at will?
Yes. Yeah, I just didn't hear who you said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so he's second on the depth chart after being there for 3 days, which is interesting and very telling as to where they are right now. So I have a lot of faith in Marcus Freeman as a defensive coordinator. I'm interested to see what he's going to be like as a position coach, because he's dealing with a lot of crap right now as far as the depth chart is concerned.
I don't care how good of a coach you are, losing 3 players in your 2 deep, including your first and third players at one position for the season before your second game is that's a problem. And look, they've all been kind of freaky things. It's like sometimes you look and say, okay, well, you got these consistent shoulder injuries, and but a lot of these are just kind of, there's nothing you can do as a strength coach really guy's torn both of his Achilles in 2 seasons. That's a his body problem.
Yeah, right.
And it stinks for the kid. Shane Simon, labrums are just some of those things that happen in football, especially when you don't have good tackling technique. Maris Lufau got rolled up on. It's
unfortunate.
So it's a football injury. It's just bad luck.
Yeah,
it's just bad luck.
Right.
But still, it's why you should be recruiting good players every year, and why you don't. Well, they're going to be, and why you don't why you shouldn't as fans just every time they lose a guy spin it as like, oh, they'll be fine, they can lose, they're okay without Kendall Abdul-Rahman, he wasn't that good anyway. They're fine without Jordan Johnson, he was overrated anyway. Wow, Jay Brunell stunk anyway. Oh, okay, well, now you don't have anybody left.
There's a lot I would give to have Jack Lamb back on this team.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way.
And look, and that was problematic too, because Jack had his own injury, issues at times, right? And he didn't play a ton in the opener at Colorado because he had a concussion, right? Well, we don't know if he'd had a concussion in Notre Dame, but he's going to end up playing a lot. But still, he's been able to help you. And you just lost 3 guys from your special teams, your coverage team.
Absolutely, yeah, good call there. Didn't even think about special teams.
Yeah, and Osita Ekwan is out. I believe he's still out. So you can't move him back to linebacker.
Right.
Because I believe he's still out. He had some kind of foot injury or something, so he was in a boot throughout fall camp. So, yeah, it's an issue. We do have another super chat from Jay.
We do.
Jay says, thank you for the super chat, by the way, Jay. Do we see the return of Red-Faced Kelly if these problems continue throughout the year?
I think Brian Kelly has
not in
matured.
games.
I think he's matured enough for game, during game situations where you're not necessarily going to see that. It was close with the rough into the kicker, but I don't blame him.
It won't be as players like it was
right
against South Florida which is when that all happened. And I still feel like that was overblown. That was such a disaster of a day. However delay, I would have lost my mind too. It wasn't like we saw that every flipping game. It was but and then he got super kind of. He didn't like that perception, and so he's changed.
And I get that, yeah.
But I would hope that maybe we're seeing Red-Faced Kelly in a couple of these staff meetings.
Yes,
that would be.
I'd be okay with that, frankly.
To see.
I'd be okay with that because it's time to call some guys on the carpet.
I wouldn't mind seeing Tommy Reese have a couple red-faced moments with some of his position coaches either. But we'll see. And then this question here real quick from John DeCrisio. Who determines who plays? The position coach, the coordinator, the head coach. Everybody has a role in
all
determines.
of the above.
Yeah. But how it goes in games is you decide what your rotation is going to look like during the week, and then it's up to the position coach to carry out that plan. I do know, I don't know, but I've been told that Tom Reese does allow his assistants to have a big role in it, as I think that's how it should be. I mean,
and I would be fine with that.
If you don't think a position coach is capable of figuring out who should start at his position, then you need to find a new position coach.
Yeah, he shouldn't be there. Absolutely. You have to trust your coaches. You have to. I mean, and then if you're not, then you're going to get resentment from the coach, and it's not a good working relationship if you can tell that there's no trust there. Mm-hmm. So I have no problem with him, taking what the position coach has to say. No problem.
Yeah. This is a question I want to get to before we kind of move on, because we are going to break down the Toledo game and give predictions. But Justin McArthur says, and if all those receivers weren't very good and weren't going to contribute, then why recruit them in the first place? Well, I'll turn it a little bit. Who was responsible for recruiting a lot of those guys, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
It's frustrating.
And I think some the receivers that left, I think it was talent that walked out the door. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? For various reasons. I think Lawrence Keys is a starter. I think that Jay Brunell could have been a contributor. Maybe not this year, right? But moving forward, I think he could have absolutely been a rotational guy that you could count on in big situations, right? I think that Jordan Johnson, I think he could have been a contributor. So I mean, There's talent with these guys. They're just not here anymore. They at least
would have given you some depth where you felt like you would have had somebody to turn to if guys go down. Hopefully nobody goes down. Hopefully Kevin and Braden are able to stay healthy. Hopefully Avery can stay healthy. Joe can stay healthy. That's obviously the ideal situation. If those guys can stay healthy, they'll be fine. And then Jack Sullivan says, "Hey, IB Nation, do you know how long ago the Xavier Watts move was talked about?" They didn't start coming to him until the last week. When the injury started to pile up, like after Shane, and so like within the last several days, I should say, within the last several days,
right.
This was not something that had been planned for a period of time. This is in reaction to guys being injured. So it's not a move where like, we really think Xavier can help us there. It's more of like, we don't have anybody.
Yeah, they're going down the roster. They're like,
right. Exactly.
He's got to change his number. That's
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just saying. What number is he right now?
He's 2.
2?
Yeah, and that's DJ Brown.
Oh, yeah. He's got to change his number again. He's 21, 82, 2. Yeah.
Right. That just stinks. I'm a numbers guy, so I like that kind of stuff. But
right.
Anyway.
Right. All right. So I want to get to Toledo thing. I want to be able to talk about Toledo. And then once we do that, we're going to jump back into some questions and stuff. So here before we go, but let's jump into Toledo, Vince. So, all right, Vince, Toledo time.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
I'll tell you what, I'm so glad that they're playing Toledo this weekend and not a Big Ten team or a Pac-12 team or an ACC team or something like that.
Just name any of the Power 5 conferences, and I think that you'd
except
be okay
like Vanderbilt or some team that lost to like East Tennessee State or something like that. But they got to play a game on Saturday, right?
Yeah.
And they're still – the good thing is a lot of the injuries, with the exception of Blake Fisher, a lot of the injuries that were announced today were not to starters. At least the injuries that have been announced in the last week. Kevin Bauman wasn't a starter. Paul Mwala wasn't a starter. Shane Simon wasn't a starter. Lawrence Keys wasn't a starter.
True.
The Blake Fisher one hurts, but your O-line, you should be able to survive that. If you have the kind of coach you should have at a place that's called O-line U, then you should be okay. So you play Toledo this weekend. And we broke it down yesterday, Vince. We did the matchups, the statistical matchups, offense versus defense, and all those types of things. And we dove into how this is going to be this isn't your typical MAC team, but still not a team that should challenge Notre Dame. So let's get into some of the matchups, Vince, that we're most looking forward to. And I think let's start with the Notre Dame offense. And I think the biggest thing now is at this point in time, the only thing I care to watch on Sunday or Saturday when it comes to Notre Dame offense is what is your line going to look like? That's the matchup. Then it's the line and Jeff Quinn against the Toledo front, but also the defensive coordinator, Vince Karras, and what he's going to throw at them and what type of game plan is he going to have, and are they going to be able to pick this stuff up? Because talent-wise, they should be okay on Saturday, but are they going to be able to do the things schematically, technically, mechanically, force-wise that says, okay, yeah, they picked that stuff up and they're going to be fine when they play Purdue and Wisconsin and Cincinnati. Or, yeah, they did it because they played Toledo. When they play a team with a pulse on defense, they're going to be in trouble.
Well, and I think we're definitely going to learn something here about the offensive line, because we've heard stories about how in the Harry Hiestand days, there was nothing that the other team could throw at them that they hadn't seen in practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were very well prepared from a scheme standpoint, right? And we've heard a little bit of the opposite now with the new regime and the offensive line room. So I think we're going to learn a lot about this group based on what is going to get thrown at them from a scheme standpoint. Are they going to be prepared for the stunts and the slants and the twists and the games that are going to happen in the front seven? Or is it going to be like, whoa, that's the first time we've seen that? You know what I mean? And look, I'm not anticipating they're going to pick up every single one. A guy's going to get turned loose at some point, right? It's just going to happen. It's still game 2, and you got a brand new left tackle playing. So there's going to be some growing pains, but I think we're going to get an idea how well prepared this group is from a schematic standpoint. Of course, I'm going to be looking to see if they're firing off the ball, all the different things that we've talked about. But just from a schematic standpoint, look, you and I both know that Toledo is going to throw the kitchen sink at them when it comes to scheme. They are. And if they're not prepared for that, that's a problem to me. Right. And that's an epidemic type problem, and it's going to hurt them moving forward.
Yeah. I think that's an important part of this. I think the other thing for me is we got to see some play with some physicality.
Absolutely.
And they have to. If they don't come out and play hard and just blow Toledo off the ball, honestly, I could even somewhat live with some mistakes in some of those areas you mentioned. I could live with that. If I thought that, boy, they're going to play physical. Their talent, because talent will win out in that situation.
Sure.
So, but can you play at the physicality? That to me is the thing. Because the other stuff, I always feel like Vince, even a mediocre coach, and I don't think Jeff Quinn's a bad coach. I've never said he's a bad coach. Just a solid coach is going to be able to figure that stuff out eventually, the twists and the stunts and things like that. You'll be able to figure that out eventually. But if you're not playing with the force that you need to be a great line, that's where you're going to get in trouble.
Sure,
in my opinion. So that's really what I want to see. And look, I want to see the receivers this week. I want to see the matchup against the Toledo DBs. It's a little bit of a banged up secondary. They got some guys out in the secondary. This is the kind of week where, yes, I want to see Notre Dame run the ball, but you need to continue building this momentum with the pass game that you saw last weekend. Right. I don't say they need to throw it 40 times. I'm not saying that, but just take your shots. Have some. Let's see what Coach Reese does to scheme up this staff. And so we know what he did against Florida State. Is did he just run plays to run plays, or is he going to scheme up Toledo specifically for Toledo? I anticipate he will, but you never know until you get to the second game. All you have right now is one data point.
Right.
So I'm curious to see what are the things he does schematically to get these guys going in this game. Those are things I want to see from this game. So it's more about just not so much this player versus that player when you're playing Toledo, especially their defense. It's more about what kind of preparation, what kind of game plan. It's a short week. Do they just say, hey, let's just go out and do what we do and get the W, or are they going to say, hey, look, let's go out there and treat this like a normal game where we're going to try to figure out ways to get our best players isolated, move guys around, do all the kind of things, which I thought they did a great job of last week. You had all summer to prepare for that.
Yeah.
Where you learn the next thing you learn about a coordinator is, okay, well, your game plan when you had all summer to prepare looked great. Can you do that when you only have 3 practices to prepare? That's going to be a different story. And you have one less day of because normally on Sunday you're watching film of the previous game. Then you start watching your film of your next opponent. You start putting scouting reports together. Well, you didn't do that till Monday this week. Normally you kind of have your game plan somewhat figured out by Monday.
Sure.
Well, you weren't getting back from Florida State till Monday.
At 4 a.m. Yeah.
Right. So, we're going to learn too, and I'm excited to see what he's going to do. I'm optimistic he's going. Like when I ask that question, it's not a doubting Tommy Rees question. It's just literally as a football coach, that's what I always look for when I'm evaluating a football team is what do we see new in week 2?
Yeah,
that's going to be determined by what our players can do, but then also what are the weaknesses of this upcoming opponent? Because what Florida State did well and didn't do well is going to be different than what Toledo did well and doesn't do well. And that's what I like evaluating about a coordinator. Okay, what wrinkles are we going to see this week? What are you going to do to counter what Toledo is going to do based on what you did last week? Those are the things that I want to see, and not just come out and say we're going to go 12 and 13 personnel all day and establish the run. It's not going to make you better. It's not going to help you beat Wisconsin and Cincinnati and stuff like that. You got to establish the run, but you got to do it within the framework of who you think you are as a football team.
Right. It's an identity game. And somebody said it was a get right game yesterday. It's an identity game. It's we think we know who this offense is, but I need to see it on a consistent basis to know what this offensive identity really is. And like you said, I'm not looking at specific player versus player matchups in this because look, I'm not going to feed anybody a line of BS that I'm looking for. You know what I mean? If it's a one-on-one situation, the Notre Dame player should win. I mean, that's just the way it is, right? And that's where these two programs are. And I have a lot of faith in what the wide receivers did and I'm basing everything on last week, right? I have a lot of faith in the wide receivers. I have a lot of faith in the quarterback, and I have a lot of faith in the running backs. And I have a pretty good amount of faith in the tight ends, right? Do I think Michael Mayer is going to drop 2 key balls again? No, I don't. I think he's going to get that cleaned up. So my focus offensively is going to be on the identity, number one. Number two, the chip on the shoulder with the offensive line and the scheme of the offensive line and how they handle the defensive side of things. I think the rest of it's going to take care of itself. If they continue on, the path that we think that they're on and the way that we, things that we saw in game one, this offense is going to score a bunch of points. There's no question about it. And it's going to be fun to watch. It's just, we're going to have to isolate some of those little things and see if this team has taken the step that we think that they can and should take at this point. So, not a lot to keep an eye on offensively, unfortunately. Right. I'm going to be focused on the big daddies in the middle. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I am looking forward to seeing what they do defensively. I mean, offensively on the outside, and because I do think there's things we can still learn. Is like, look, was the receivers had one great game against a mediocre secondary. Okay, this isn't can they do it again? Right, that's the thing. A repeat performance is really what you need to see. Do they do anything to get Braden Lindsey a little bit more involved in this game? Because they had stuff designed for him last week, right? But just the time and all that. So, it's more about not that they didn't do things for him last week, but a lot of things they did for him last week were the deep shots, which makes total sense because that's where you want him to be. But, what are some other things they can do to kind of get him rolling? Do they try to come out with some screens for him? Do we see a reverse to him this week? Do we see maybe some more levels concepts, those top down concepts we've talked about, the vertical stretch type stuff? No, we're trying to get him on drags, which is the one of the balls he did catch last week, crossers, things where you can get him in space. Those are some things I'm interested to see. They got to get Avery Davis going. To me, that would be a point for me. It's like, look, he had no touches last week. We got to do something to make sure that that Avery doesn't get lost in the mix, especially now that Lawrence Keys is gone. So maybe there's some things early in the game to make sure Avery gets some touches. Those are things that I think are going to be important because this is a building blocks game, right? As you kind of referred to, Vince. This isn't just this is about, okay, you're trying to be this team that's going to compete for a championship. What steps can you take this game to get there?
Right.
And I think those are things where this is the kind of game, like you don't say, hey, we got to get Avery Davis going when you're playing Bama in the semifinals, right? That's here's who you are, go win the game. When you're playing Toledo, there does need to be and look, I've done this as a play caller, Vince. I'm sure you have too. You go into the game and say, hey, look, we've got to make sure so-and-so gets going. He has had a couple games. His confidence is shot. We got to get him some early touches and some easy early touches if it's a confidence thing. With Avery, it wasn't a confidence thing. It was just the ball never came his way in the game plan.
Right.
Because of the way Florida State was playing. This isn't a criticism of Tommy Reese or of Avery Davis or Jack Cohn. It's just sometimes that happens.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Kyron Williams got a ton of touches. Michael Mayer got a ton of touches. Kevin Austin got a ton of touches. Well, everybody can't touch the ball every week.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, because they didn't get a ton of touches last week, this may be a game to say, hey, look, let's run some look screens. Let's look some people call it now screens. Let's try to get some quick game stuff to Avery. Maybe we do a jet sweep or two to him. Maybe we get Braden Lindsey on a reverse, something like that, right? I want to see if they do. If the guy, we're going to keep doing our game plans the way that it is, and eventually that'll come as part of the normal game plan. You go that route too. I'm curious to just see which one he goes.
Yeah,
and I think that's the interesting thing for me. Like a football nerd, like those are the things that I look for, especially in games like this.
Well, and one of the things I noticed when I was rewatching the game, because I didn't notice it as much when I was watching it live, they ran a lot of motion to Braden Lindsey in the backfield. jet motion, things of that nature, but they never gave him the ball. And so I'm interested to see if they're just trying to set something up for later. What does that look like? Is it window dressing? That kind of a thing. Are they just giving other teams something to pay attention to? Are they just putting a guy in motion to see what the coverages are? What is the reasoning for that, and what's that going to look like moving forward? I feel like they're playing with us a little bit, and they're going to start giving him the ball and things like that. I mean, we've seen how effective Braden Lindsey can be in that kind of a motion set, right?
And I think that's smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not everything is meant for that game. What I mean by that is, yes, you're doing it for that game, because if Florida State would have reacted a certain way, they'd have come back and given him the ball. But it's like, hey, you've now put that on people's minds of, hey, they're going to be getting Braden Lindsey moving a lot, and at some point in time, if you don't respect that, they're going to go to it, right? Well, Florida State respected it, so they didn't go to it. They did other things off of that,
right?
Those are the things I want that I see next. And again, you can't do it all in 1 week, right? You have to do what you got to do to beat Florida State. They did that. Now it's about, okay, what's that next foundational thing? Defensively, Vince, it's about cleaning the game up. That's what it is for me against Toledo. It's you're better than they are. Yes, this is a good Toledo offense. I'm looking forward to seeing this Toledo offense play. Sure. I think they're going to be well coached. They got some good players. I think this quarterback can play. I think Notre Dame should be able to handle them. But how long does it take to kind of get some of those things cleaned up? That's what I'm curious to see is, can you clean up the tackling issues in a short week? Can you clean up some of the assignment mistakes that we saw last week? Things that you somewhat expect in an opener. But you expected an opener, but the reason you don't expect it moving forward is because you think the staff gets it figured out. So that's what we want to see is to me is I don't have any problem with the game plan up until the fact they went away from the game plan. That's my criticism is they went away from the game plan. I had no problem with the Notre Dame game plan for the first 2.5 quarters of that game.
Nailed it.
Outside of 2 long plays, they dominated Florida State at the point of attack, right?
And we told you there was going to be big plays. Right. We said there was going to be big plays. Yeah.
It doesn't mean I like it, but you know, especially early, it's just going to happen sometimes. What I didn't like is those big plays came from. See, when I say big plays, like sometimes you play man one, your guys are going to get beat. Right, Houston Griffith just got beat, but it was kind of bad technique. The 89-yard touchdown run, that was inexcusable because you were there. You had a 3 technique that slanted the wrong direction. A linebacker was slow getting over the top, and your safety comes down. He's supposed to fill that hole, and he just whiffs.
Whiffs.
Right? That against Florida State. Now, again, Florida State, the running back position is the one area we said that's where they're the best, and that's what showed on Sunday night. But you're going to play other really good running backs, including Saturday against Toledo. You're going to play a good running back against when you get to Cincinnati. Jerome Ford is every bit the home run hitter that Jashawn Corbin is, and then some. This ain't the last good running back group you're going to face this year with Florida State. So how can they clean that stuff up? That to me is better angles, being in better position, not overrunning plays. Somebody made a point. I think it was last night's show, or maybe it was yesterday's show. Where they said seemed like guys were maybe going a little too fast. And can they play under control a little bit more? I think those are all things that we want to see. So to me, it's a cleanup game for the defense. Yeah. I have no problem with the stuff you did in the first 2.5 quarters. None. Right. Clean that stuff up. Don't whiff. Make the tackles. Do better angles. Things like that. That's what I want to see, and that's what's going to tell us a lot about where this defense is going to grow to.
Well, and it's what I'm looking for specific. It's just more of a complete game, right? Don't go away from the game plan 2.5 quarters in because you're complacent with, or you're happy with where things are right now, right? Continue on with the game plan, right? Regardless of the personnel that's in the game, continue on with the game plan and continue to hammer those guys, right?
Which I still don't think that was a Marcus Freeman decision.
I don't think it was.
I think it was a Marcus Freeman decision to stay in the 3 down. That was his mistake. That was a mistake Marcus Freeman made. I think the whole calling off the dogs thing, I think that was Brian Kelly.
And I agree with you. And
I have no evidence of that other than having followed Brian Kelly for 12 years.
Right. But that's part of it, though, right? I mean, we need to see a complete game because we want to see that from the offense, too. Mm-hmm. I remember going into, the overtime, I said something to you. I'm like, man, I hope they just go for a touchdown here. And you and I were both like, but it's not going to happen, and they're just going to run it up the middle 3 times and kick a field goal. Go for the throat, man. Go for the jugular. That you have to have that killer attitude. If you want to be a championship team, you got to have that killer attitude on both sides of the ball. You can't be Mr. Nice Guy. And I don't know if that's the goal of Brian. Well, we were up 18, we're good. It's a win. We're good. No, you're not good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Alabama blows teams out all the time, and people still respect Nick Saban, right? I have a – if you don't have that killer instinct, you're never going to win big. And I'm hoping that it gets to that point.
Right. So those are the things we're looking to see from the game, Vince. Let's get down to just quickly before we make our predictions. Let's get down to our keys to the game, right? Mm-hmm. Let's start on offense. I have 3 keys, right? I'm going to share them here real quick with you. Number 1, you got to get the run game going. And now, again, that doesn't mean you go 12, 13 personnel and do something within who you're going to be. More, 3 receivers, things like that. Yes, you're going to play some 12 personnel, but they were a heavy 11 personnel team against Florida State. Right. I think we're going to see that a lot. I'd like to see a little bit more 2-back. Now that you have Logan Diggs back, maybe you can do more of that because your depth chart's a little bit healthier, even though we're not going to see Sebo Flemister for the next 3 weeks. He won't play for the first 4 games of the year. He's not. Okay, so be prepared for that. But what are you going to see? What are you going to see from the run game, right? Because I think you do have to run the ball against Toledo. If you can't run a ball against Toledo, it doesn't get any easier the rest of the way. I mean, it just is not. So I want to see them get the run game going within the framework of who they are. If they're going 12, 13 personnel all day and that's the only way they can run, that's problematic because they can't do that all year. If they want to be the kind of offense that you need to compete for a championship. So that's one thing for me. I want to see them spread the ball around a little bit more this week. And again, that's not a complaint about last week because that's who was open. I mean, Austin was open. He was in the one-on-ones. Mayer was open. Kyron was open. It's not a complaint. It's just more of a let's see them spread it around a little bit more. Get Lindsey involved. Get Avery Davis involved. Some of those things, right? What's wrong? Did you see a comment?
No. It's what I have as my second key is so similar to what you're saying.
Yes.
It was just kind of making me laugh is all. Anyway.
And then my third one's finish off drives, right? You get across field, it's got to get 6. You got to at least get 3, but you need to be getting 6s. We could do it as it's the similar thought of what we had last week, which was start fast. But the problem is Notre Dame started fast. They just didn't finish. They were moving the ball early. They just couldn't finish off drives. They made mistakes to not finish off drives. So this week it's going to be finished. That means finishing off drives. That means when you have Toledo's a chance to just bury Toledo, you bury them. It means all-encompassing. Finish off blocks, finish off drives, and finish off Toledo. Those are my 3 keys for the Notre Dame offense.
Okay, my keys for the Notre Dame offense, my first one is an aggressive start. And you can say that that's start fast because that's kind of what I said last week, but it's more than that. It's more, be aggressive on the offensive line. We talked about that, firing off, imposing your will. I want to see that, but I also want to see them be aggressive in the pass game still. I still want to see them take those shots. If they got a one-on-one opportunity, take it. It's okay. It's okay to be a better team, right? And so I want to see that from the get-go. I want to see them be aggressive. I want to see them push the ball down the field, right? I want to continue to see that, right? So it's start aggressive. That is so important for me. And I could have put start aggressive, stay aggressive, right? Because I agree with you as far as they need a complete game from the offense. But it just aggressive start. My second one, and this is where I was kind of giggling a little bit, was I have get the slot involved. And that's very similar to your spread the ball around a little bit more. I want to see them get the ball spread around, and they didn't get it to the slot very much at all, really, in that game.
And again, I want to remind people, we're not complaining about that. Right?
No,
that's just how the game's going to go sometimes.
Absolutely.
Vince, can you explain? Because I want to make sure people understand this, because some people are going to hear they're being critical. No, can you explain why it's important sometimes in games like this to say, hey, look, we need to make sure that so and so. Maybe we overemphasize getting such and such position, because you didn't say a player, you said a position. Right. Can you explain why that's important in a game like this?
Well, because you need to make sure that I'm trying to figure out how to verbalize this. You don't want to play with 10, right? I mean, you want to make sure that everybody's involved, but you have to make sure that position is still being respected by the defense. Because if you're not getting that position involved, they're not going to worry about it. They're going to continue to do what they do, and then that's it. You want to make sure that there's a chance on every play that every position could get the ball. And so you want to make sure that not only this game, but then future games who are watching this film are noted. Okay, well, wow, they didn't really need to go to the slot there, but they did, and that was dangerous. You know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, why I want to get all the positions involved, because that makes me more multiple offensively, and it makes me more dangerous because you don't know where I'm going to go with the football. And there's things you can do because they clogged the middle, basically, is what Florida State did, and that kind of took away the slot, right? But there's things that you can do. For example, how Florida State scored that touchdown. They got their slot involved. They got him to the outside, which is where,
and they created used a formation to know that they were going to get that match in one of their two slots. They were going to get a one-on-one against Houston Griffin, and they wanted to go with that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's one of the way you manipulate your formation to get the matchup that you want, and they did, and they took advantage of it. So I want to see Notre Dame do some things like that to get the slot, whoever that happens to be, get that position a little bit more involved in what they're trying to do offensively. I guess I can't even read my own handwriting. My third key is stay balanced, and stay balanced in a good way. They were balanced last week with the attempt to run the football. They just weren't very good at it. I want them to stay balanced and productive at the same time. I want to see the run game get more production than they did. And obviously that has a lot to do with what the offensive line is doing, et cetera. But I want them to be more balanced from a production standpoint, not from a play calling standpoint, because they didn't abandon the run game last week.
25 carries between your top two backs.
They didn't abandon it. I just want them to be more productive in it, right? And so those are my three offensive keys.
I want to add, too, on that last part about getting the slot involved. I think another part of it is you need to make sure that your players are engaged.
Well,
if you go through 2-3 games where, hey, look, man, I'm out there busting my tail, I'm running routes, I'm getting open, and I'm not getting the ball, that can be frustrating. So when you have games like this where you can maybe force the issue at a certain position a little bit more, you take advantage. Because it's part one about making sure the defense knows, hey, we're going to throw to every position, so you got to cover them all. It's also, I think, about, hey, look, Avery, don't worry, you're our guy. That's how last week went. We need to make sure that you get him involved. Hey, Braden, don't worry. You keep running those go routes because we're going to get you some shots. I wouldn't have a problem if on the first drive of the game they just said we're going to drop back and Jack, drop back, hit that depth, and just take a shot to Braden. Unless they're like in too high, playing cover two,
right.
Take that shot. If they're in cover two, then honestly, you know what I wouldn't mind seeing? First play of the game, go 12 personnel and put Braden Lindsey and George Takis on one side of the field and run forwards. And if they're in cover two, you hit that seam route. If they're in cover, 1 or cover 3, you just take your shot to hit. By the time you get top of your drop, you know where it's going. Hit one of them, because that's another position I'd like to see, kind of that number 2 tight end getting him a little bit more involved in the pass game.
Yeah, no love last week.
Yeah, I'd like to see that a little bit more too. So those are my keys. So Vince, let's go to defense. And honestly, I only have 2.
Okay, I got 3.
But I have 2. Dominate the line of scrimmage and play discipline. Look, yes, Toledo's got players and they're good. It's still Toledo.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not saying that in like a lazy name. Look, they're good players. They're really good players to that level, but they're not to the level that should beat Notre Dame or challenge Notre Dame. Right. As long as you dominate the line of scrimmage and play disciplined football, they're gonna shut Toledo down. So to me, it's real simple. I'm gonna keep it real simple when it comes to this breakdown, and those are my keys.
Well, we talked about pretty much everything that I have written down, more or less. The first one is a complete game. I want to see them go from start to finish the way they started last game. I need to see a complete game from them. My second one is they got to focus on fundamentals, and I think that's what hurt them last week. Whether it was tackling, whether it was setting the edge, whether it was assignments, the fundamentals were lacking towards the end. You can blame it on fatigue. You can blame it on whatever you want to blame it on. Their fundamentals weren't great towards the end. So focus on fundamentals. And my third one is force the issue. Force the issue defensively. Make them have to adapt to what you're doing defensively.
Dictate.
And they did that in the first half against Florida State. They dictated what Florida State was going to do.
And outside of one play in that until they called off the dog.
Right.
Florida State they scored on their first drive. I think Notre Dame stopped them on their next 2 drives.
Right.
That's how it went from 20-17 to 38-20.
Right.
Because Notre Dame had 3 straight scores, right? I mean, so you had to get some stops in there. And they did.
Exactly.
So yes, so please continue. But the point I was making is like it even went in the third quarter. It wasn't until they changed the defense that Florida State started
exactly
put drives together.
Yep. Force the issue, be the dominant force, make them, adapt to what you're doing. Those are my three. Again, very simple. We talked about all of these things, so I don't want to, go into too much detail because we already did.
And you're going to be having to get back to class soon. So
I guess so. I lost track of time.
Yeah. It's okay.
Wow.
Hey, kids, you just roll the dodgeballs out and you'll be fine. I'm totally kidding. So, Vince, it's prediction time.
Yes.
Let's kick off with you. Let's dive right into it. Let's just go. What is your prediction and how you see this game playing out?
Look, I will probably never predict a shutout, even though this against Toledo, maybe this is your best shot at a shutout.
No, I'd say Navy's their best shot.
Okay, that's fair.
This
is
a really good offensive football team. It really
Agreed.
I'd say Wisconsin, you have a better shot at shutting out Wisconsin than you do Toledo.
That's hilarious and so true. But I think Notre Dame's going to score. I think I'm actually underselling the offense from a scoring standpoint with my prediction. I've got Notre Dame scoring 49 points. I think I might be underselling them. I think that they could score more than that. And maybe I kind of anticipate that, to be honest with you. But then again, I may be underestimating Toledo. I've got them at 17. I have a lot of faith in what the defense is going to do. I think they will force the issue in this game. I think Marcus Freeman, I don't want to say he was embarrassed about the way things went last week, but I think he wants to make a statement.
I don't think he's embarrassed. I think he was ticked. I think probably more ticked off.
There you go. That's a better word for it. I appreciate that.
We should have done something. We were better than that. I'm better than that.
Yes.
I put them in bad position. I'm gonna let them dominate.
And I just don't see that being the case this week, right?
Your final score was, say it again. What's your final score was?
49-17.
49-17. Okay, that's an impressive victory. I'm going a little bit more competitive. I'm going 45-24. Okay. I do think Toledo's going to hit some plays. I do think they're going to move the ball a little bit early because I think this is a good offense. And I think they're going to put a score on the board late. I think that's where I'm coming from. I think the offense is going to be good, but as we know, Brian Kelly does not like, putting that pedal down. And I mean, they scored 52 points on Bowling Green 2 years ago, and this is a way better team than Bowling Green was.
Sure.
So barring them getting a couple scores off other ways than offense, which they did against New Mexico, right, 2 years ago.
Sure.
I see this being a situation where they'll score a lot, but they won't score a lot late. Does that make sense?
I get that.
I'm seeing it being a little bit less competitive than 45-24, but I do think, like I said, I do think Toledo can score. This is a good if Notre Dame gives up 17 real-time points to Toledo, that's a good performance against this offense. I'm telling you, this is going to be one of the 5 or 6 best offenses Notre Dame's going to face this year. Schematically, skill-wise, quarterback-wise, they don't have the line, in my opinion, but I like this football team. I do. This is my pick to win the MAC this year.
Sure.
Right? So again, should not compete with Notre Dame. It should be a convincing win, but it's not. This ain't Bowling Green. This isn't. You know what I mean? Like this isn't Miami of Ohio from a couple years ago. This is a good football team for that level. So I'm going 45-22. I'm hoping that Notre Dame can get the run game going, but even if they don't, they should still be able to get the ball downfield and do those types of things. So 45-24 is my prediction for this with a Notre Dame victory. So Vince, anything else you'd like to add before you head off back to class?
Just that I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's mailbag because and I'm going to try to bring the positive heat tomorrow because I'm feeling so negative right now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to try to bring the positive heat to our mailbag tomorrow, but I'm really looking forward to it. And thanks everybody for jumping in. There's a lot of great comments over here. I'm just kind of getting into the weeds and reading them, but Brian, it's been fun. It's been real. And I got a doubleheader tonight, so I'm gonna be busy. I'm excited.
You got doubleheader. Oh, that's right. Your son's got
soccer and football, baby. Playing at both. So anyway, everybody have a great day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.
All right, so that is going to be it for our predictions part of this, and I'm going to try to go through here and get some comments and questions before we leave. I'm not going to bring them all up because I have to get back, and we have a lot of things we have to get done today in preparation for the game. But I did want to address some of these comments and questions and things along those lines as we get into this. Irish Cubby says, I feel like every time things start to look good, there's a problem at wide receiver. This just can't keep happening. I would agree. I would agree. D-Rock, good afternoon, everyone. The injury bug is officially here in South Bend. Yeah. And just to recap for those that came late, Blake Fisher's out 8 weeks. Shane Simon's out for the year. Paul Moala's out for the year. Kevin Bauman's out at least 6 weeks. You will not see Sebo Flemister for the first 4 games. That's not injury related. I don't think we're going to see Jordan Patelho anytime soon, not injury related. And then, of course, Lawrence Keys has transferred from the team, and Xavier Watts has moved to Rover, which I don't think is going to go over very well. Irish Cubby says, I don't get it. Wide receiver is such an easy position to rotate guys, keep them happy and engaged. Why can't this get figured out? It's a great question. Terry Howie says, hi, everyone. Irish fan since 1969. I'm afraid that the problem in the receiver room is bigger than Dell. Kelly is as much to blame as Dell. I would say from a big picture standpoint of he's responsible for who is on the staff and how the things go. Yeah, Brian Kelly is as responsible for it. But I would say specifically to the development and the rotation and things along those lines, that is a Dell problem. Brian Kelly's the one that keeps him on the staff. Brian Kelly's the one that continues to allow this to happen. But I would say this is not just a Brian Kelly thing. It's like Brian Kelly has a role because he's the head coach. The buck stops with him. But this is an issue with the receivers coach as well, which I do think you're saying. I just don't know if I'm going to put as much on Brian Kelly other than he's the one responsible for it. Brandon says, you have a receiver leave the team, then move an explosive receiver to Rover. Ridiculous. Which also comes after an offseason in which you had lost 4 receivers from your roster. Brandon says, hopefully they move him back to receiver next year as there's 4 linebackers coming in. I don't see that because if they were going to keep him on, move back to offense, why not move Justin Walters? Why not move Kerry G? You're telling me that's the other problem. None of your big safeties are good enough to play Rover, but Xavier Watts, who's 5'11 and a half and like 190 pounds, is good enough to play Rover. I don't see it. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Searcher Green asks, are you feeling Watts is cool with that or he's the next out? I'm not going to sit there and tell you that Xavier Watts is going to leave. I'm not saying that. I haven't been told that. No one has said he's leaving. But what I will say is that I'm pretty confident that this is not a move that's being well received. That's what I will tell you. Hunter Moore says also, you can't tell me that Avery Davis is multiple snaps better than Keys. I would agree. Brandon says, Brian, what would you chalk all these injuries to? Were they not developed well enough in the offseason, lack of physical contact, or what? Honestly, Brandon, with the way these injuries are, it just seems like bad luck to me. I mean, you can't really – I don't know. And if people that are, trainers or doctors maybe will correct me on this, but I have never seen – a torn meniscus from a 335-pound kid as a strength and conditioning program. You could say labrum is, but it would have to be where it's happening to multiple players. Just labrums happen. I don't care how good you're. Where I get nervous about is there a bigger problem, and we saw this pre-2017. Is we were seeing a lot of shoulders. We were seeing a lot of feet problems, a lot of feet and shoulder problems. When I see a lot of feet and shoulder problems, it makes me question what is the staff doing? This is the only shoulder issue. I mean, Maris Luafau got rolled up on in practice. It was a freaky injury. It happens. Shane had the labrum. Paul Moala tore his Achilles. I don't know if there's really anything that a strength program can do. I just think it's bad luck, honestly. And sometimes when a player's coming back from an injury, you run the risk of injuring that other leg because just the nature of that leg. One leg, you kind of overdo development of one leg and it can undersell another or vice versa. Sometimes it's just bad luck. So I don't know if I'm going to say, I don't know, right. I don't have with Matt Bayless because, and also he's now been here long enough to where if this was an issue, we would have seen it before. So I don't think it's a bigger issue. I think it's just bad luck. As far as I know, he says could be an extremely athletic rover, though, question mark. I'm assuming Freeman talked to him about how he's going to fit in his defense. As far as I'm aware, that conversation has not happened. Or at least hasn't happened to the degree that you're saying. This is not about moving Xavier Watts to rover because they think he can play rover. This is taking Xavier Watts and moving him there because you need a body because you're thin on numbers. This isn't some like master move if they see this great potential from Xavier Watts to play rover, and so they've decided to move him now. That's not the case. Comments like this always make me laugh. Oh, goodness gracious. Bang 1801, I was excited about this year, and the last few days have kind of drained me. I would still be excited about this year because, as I said, outside of Blake Fisher, a lot of these things that have happened are happening number twos. The starting lineup has not been super effective. I mean, Paul Muller was a 2, Shane Simon was a 2. Well, I guess you could say Maris Luafau too. So they've had 2 guys in the starting lineup go down, which is just not great. But, I mean, Bauman was a 3, Simon was a 2, Moala was a 3, Lawrence Keys was a 2, Xavier Watts was a scout team receiver. I mean, so a lot of this is not happening to the starters. So for now, I think they're still – my expectations haven't changed at all about this team. It's just they're at the point now where, as Vince said earlier, your margin for error now is really, really thin. Right, let me get down here. Yeah, Hunter Morris, I just want my man Harry Heastan back. It's not going to happen. Brandon asks, so what receivers are playing on scout team, the freshman receivers we might have to rely on to be backups? Maybe Jaden Thomas, but other than that, it's going to be walk-ons. It's going to be Salerno and Brian Radigan and Griffin Eifert and guys like that are going to be now the scout team receivers, which is problematic because now you're not giving your starting defense the kind of test you hope to have. Again, it's not a shot on Brian Radigan or Matt Salerno. Those guys are really good high school football players. It's just more about, you'd like to have some scholarship guys that bring a little bit more size and things to the table to give them a look. Let's find a few more questions here before we get out of here. AJ says, if Austin, Lindsey, Wilkins, and Davis are all back not back next year, and that includes Keys and Watts being moved to rover, how are we supposed to be confident that Alexander will have a young receiving core ready to play next year, or will the starting rotation be 4 grad transfers? That's a very, very fair question. Very fair question. John A1 with the super chat, and we pulled this up too during the show. We had a super chat from Tony Stengel as well. John A1, thank you very much for the super chat. Appreciate that. We also had one. So it looks like I do not have it anymore, and I got bumped down. So I am way down this week, or way down in this. So I did miss a lot of those questions. I'm going to see if I can get to a few more of these. Sorry, I'm trying to let's see here. Hunter Moore says, I think this game is perfect timing to get things figured out in terms of the season's depth. I agree. I think the next couple games, Purdue's going to be a good football team, but again, it's another game that Notre Dame should be able to win. You should be able to play some guys and give some guys a look that maybe you normally wouldn't, in my opinion. Domer TX22. Watts to rover reminds me too much of moving Travis Thomas to running back in 2006 to linebacker in 2006. I sure would have to love Simon's brother Cody right now. Yeah, I get that. Matthew Southgate, running backs are going to get a lot of action in the pass game. I agree with you. I agree. And that's a good thing. I mean, those are weapons. And that is something that kind of helps you if you do get thinner receivers. You know, you do have Kyron Williams you can turn to a little bit in the pass game. You do have Chris Tyree. You can, and if you have with Diggs and Estime, you can do things where they can take some of those running back snaps, and Kyron and Chris can take some of the receiver snaps. So that is one of the advantages of having those type of backs is you can sustain maybe some injuries at receiver that a lot of teams otherwise couldn't and still keep your pass game rolling. That's a very good observation. Jacob Dunn, I'm looking for Carmody to take a solid jump from last week. I would expect that too, Jacob, because look, he's kind of got his feet wet, right? He had that chance to go out there in a big environment against a really good defensive line, or a couple really good defensive ends, and he had the mistakes. You're going to get in the film room. You're going to get a chance to clean those things up. I do think he'll be better this week. I just don't think he's a natural tackle, and I definitely don't think he's a natural left tackle. That's more of my concern. But I like Michael Carmody. Great him out as a top 150 caliber player coming out of high school. He's a good football player. I just don't think he should be the left tackle right now. Grant Goodrich says, is Jordan Patel going to be a Kevin Austin 2019 situation or a Dexter Williams 2018 situation? Grant, I've heard both. So I honestly don't have an answer for you. I don't. I have heard both. And I have not heard concretely either way. The original, what I was told originally when this whole thing happened, the summer was that it would be more like a Kevin Austin situation, but that I have not got any good confirmation of that at this point in time. Jacob Dunn says, this Saturday will be my first time watching them in person, 30-year fan. What is the one pregame activity that I should try to catch? The player walk. If they still do that, I think that would definitely be one. We're going to be releasing an article today. Actually, I got to get it ready here soon. I'm going to put it up here in a couple hours. That's going to be the Ultimate Game Experience article that we'll have on the site. So it would be good to get that going. Kevin says, IB tailgate. We are not having a tailgate this weekend. We are having a tailgate next weekend. I've asked people to I put a poll on the YouTube page. So if you go to the Irish Breakdown YouTube page, I've also put a poll on our message board. I'm trying to get a gauge of who's coming. It does not look like many people are going to come. So that's fine. I just need to have an idea of who's going to come so I know how much food to prepare and food to buy. So if you can, here in the next couple of days, if you could just go on the YouTube page or on the message board at Irish Breakdown and let me know, just check yes or no, check. If you don't have to check no, because I mean, if you don't check yes, I know you're not coming. But just check yes, and if you're going to bring some people with you, that's fine too. It does not have to be just you. Hey, sorry, your wife and kids have to stay over there. It's only you. Bring your family, of course, or friends, or whoever you bring with you, girlfriends, wives, kids, whatever. But I just want to kind of have an idea. It looks like maybe 10 or 15 people are probably going to be there is about it, which is fine. Again, it's okay. I just need to have an idea. I don't want to buy food for 50 people and only 10 show up, and I don't want to buy food for 10 people and 50 show up. So I just need to be prepared. Levi Bagner says, Jacob Dunn, the Irish Trumpets. I was told, somebody said in the chat yesterday, and based on things I'm hearing about this weekend's game, that they're not going to be doing anything indoors like that. That's going to be outdoors, which is a little disappointing. Okay, let me get to some more. Looks like we might be. Martin Demo says, might be dumb, but what is 12-13 personnel? That's not dumb, Martin, at all. So what 12-13 personnel is essentially how these numbers work is the first number refers to the number of running backs. The second number refers to the number of tight ends. And then you can have 5 skill players. So, any combination of running backs, receivers, and tight ends that you want. You have 5 linemen and a quarterback. So that's 6. You get 11 players. It's 5. And so essentially the first 2 numbers are the running back and tight ends, and then however many receivers is how many's left over. So if you go 11 personnel, it's 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 receivers. If you go 12 personnel, it's 1 running back, 2 tight ends, which should then be, again, that's 3, so 5, so you get 2 left, that's 2 receivers. 13 personnel, you go 21 personnel, that's 2 running backs, 1 tight end, 2 receivers, or 22 personnel would be 2 backs, 2 tight ends, 1 receiver. You could also go 10 personnel, which I don't think Notre Dame would do a whole lot because they got Michael Mayer. 10 personnel would be 1 running back, 0 tight ends, 4 receivers. So that's what that means. So running back, tight ends. That's what those numbers mean. First number running back, second number tight ends, of how many are on the field at that time. It's a very good question. Two for Travel says, walk from the Goog to the library to the stadium. Yes. And go to the bookstore. The bookstore is pretty cool too. William Alford, you're lucky. I'm not going to. You're very lucky. So we actually have some people putting some predictions in. Jeff Perry goes 42-7 Notre Dame. All right. Mark Staten says Notre Dame 38-24. Here we go. Travis McIntyre says, I'm ready to see Kevin Awesome. I love that. Kevin Awesome go for 120 yards, 6 catches and a TD this week. Appreciate all your hard work, guys. You are welcome. Travis, very, very much. DJ Wilson, 44-17. DJ, I haven't seen you posting a lot in the chats lately. I hope everything is all good. Good to see you back. Matt D says Notre Dame 45, Toledo 16. Tommy Gunn says, I definitely think they could score more than 49 points, but I think BK will get in the way. Kevin says 41-9. I'm going to assume in favor of the Irish. Searcher Green, 27-14. I'd be surprised if Notre Dame only scores 27 points this weekend. Curtis Hewitt says, I want to see way better tackling and the O-line playing aggressive. Notre Dame 48-24. You and I had very close scores. D-Rock, Notre Dame 45, Toledo 20. Two for Travel, 37-24. Larry says, same score I had predicted last week, 41-16, and he had the 41 right. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Paul Koleski says, we need to spread the wealth at receiver this year. As much as I want huge production from Austin, would love to have him back next year. If he snaps off too much, he could be gone. I think he's going to – if he is healthy this year, I think he'll still leave. Travis McIntyre with the super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. Says, wanted to check in. Longtime listener. First live show I've been a part of. Love all the info you guys provide. Good or bad, you guys do an amazing job of reporting solid info. Anyway, thanks for everything. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that very much, Travis. Appreciate the kind words. Appreciate you being a part of our show. And, of course, I appreciate you supporting our channel in all the different ways. It's supporting with your time, supporting with your encouragement, supporting financially. We appreciate all of it. So appreciate that very, very much. Chris Fortson, 41-20 in favor of Notre Dame. Hope to see Chris Tyree have a good day. Take a kickoff to the house. And, of course, against Toledo, they'd probably let him return one. Irish Joe, Irish 48-6. Joseph Salvatore, the Sebo and Botelho situations are perplexing. BK literally said they would be playing in the preseason. This is why I keep telling everybody you don't pay attention to what Brian Kelly says at press conferences. What Brian Kelly often says at press conferences and what's reality are often two different things. And, sometimes that makes sense because you've got to protect your team and some things aren't our business, but these are situations that it's just silly, especially when you're asked about it. Like, if no one asked him about it and he didn't report on it, that's fine. Hey, you didn't ask. You never asked about Botelho. You never asked about Sebo. So why should I have told you? But once you're asked about it, you don't be dishonest. He knew that they weren't going to have Jordan Botelho. So why act indignant? And this is what I said at the time. Like, he is such a convincing storyteller because he acts like he was totally. I can't believe you're even asking the question, Tim. I can't believe it. Where's this coming from? And then guess what? He's not playing. So your best special teams player last year, one of your best special teams player, isn't even on special teams. It's not injured, doesn't have COVID. What is it? Okay. But, yes, we were wrong for reporting it. Okay. Irishman 7114. Sorry for the negative responses earlier. It's okay. It was a lot to take in. On Toledo, I think we should win about 63-21. Wow, that's a big one. But I feel like with Kelly, it'll be closer to 52-24 or 28. I think I could see that. I mean, I had 45-24. I wouldn't be shocked. I mean, I would like to see. I think they're capable of hanging another touchdown on them. I just don't know if they're going to let them run the offense the way that they need to in the second half to do that. Did Watts not have a say in the move to Rover? I mean, he had a say, but most kids, when they tell you to move, you're gonna do it. I mean, it's he always had a say, but just because you agree to do something doesn't mean it's necessarily what you want to do. Now, look, he may go over there and play great and ends up getting playing time and he ends up loving it, right? He was a really good defense player in high school. And then things change. But I'm just telling you right now, that's not a move that's being received very well. Garth Cassidy says, Brian, why is Jacob Lacey playing both 3 and 1 technique? Could Aiden be the third string nose tackle? I think he could be. I think what it boils down to, Garth, is they just want to make sure that they can find ways to get Jacob Lacey on the field because he's a good football player. They're really deep at that position. Now, the depth didn't play great on Saturday. It's going to have to play better. But I think that's the reason for it. Tristan says, take the bye week off so I can catch up on my other podcast. I'm sorry, Tristan. That's probably not going to happen. Get to some more. Connor O'Doherty, his style's looking to play more with Keys gone. I mean, he's now the number 5 receiver. So, yeah, I think he will, Connor. I think he'll have an opportunity to get more playing time. I think maybe he can – because I believe he's played some slot. He's been mostly an outside guy. He was already kind of the backup to Braden Lindsey. I think they're going to have to figure some things out to be able to find ways to get some of those other guys to play some of those slot minutes when Avery Davis needs a breather. The other thing they could do is if they don't have a number 2 slot, like let's just say for whatever reason, and I'm not saying this is true, Connor, I'm just trying to make a point. Let's say that Lorenzo Styles just couldn't figure slot out right now, and Braden Lindsey's not a slot. Let's just say for argument's sake that neither of them are super comfortable in the slot, so you don't really have another guy at slot. Well, what you could do in order to take 10 to 15 snaps off of Avery Davis's legs every weekend, every game, is to say, okay, well, we can do more 12 personnel than maybe we would have. And it's Kane Barong can be that number 2 guy, or George Takis can be that number 2 guy. And so those guys can play some of the tight end positions. You're still throwing the ball. You can still move Michael Mayer around and do things like that. So that could be something they could do as well to kind of get those guys going. John A1 says, still holding hope for the offensive line. Notre Dame needs a new coach at wide receiver in 2022. I don't search. It says you said first 4 games for Sebo. Is that the same number for Jordan? I don't have an answer to that. I have an answer for Sebo. I was given intel on Sebo. I have been told both about Jordan. I've been told 4. I've been told 12. I don't have an answer for that. I don't have a definitive answer for that. Carmine Burst says, I haven't heard much about Tosh Baker since spring practice. How far is he from contributing this year? It doesn't sound like he's ready to play yet, and that's disappointing. Heard a lot of great things about him this summer. The problem is Tosh needs a lot of technical work, and I just don't think you have a position coach that's a great technical coach. And he's not making the progress that people that I know had hoped he would make this season. So that's been a little disappointing. Chad Williams says, can Polian help accelerate some of the freshman receivers by having them on special teams and get them mentally prepared to be in a solid rotation in 5 and 6 weeks? Styles and Colsey in particular. They shouldn't have to be. I mean, that's the receiver coach's job. I mean, your job is to get those guys ready to play. If you can't get them ready to play, then I think mentally ready to be in an environment, sure. I think, Chad, to your point, I think getting them like, hey, look, they're getting snaps, they have responsibilities, they're playing in front of a loud crowd. I think all those things are part of it. But for me, it's more about you have to be able to have your receivers coach get them ready on how to play the game. And I don't think he teaches them how to play the game. Polian can help them get ready for the environment and get some experience playing, but it's going to be completely up to Dell to get them ready to play, in my opinion. Cesar says, greetings to you and the entire IB Nation. Let's hope the mistakes from game 1 get fixed, hoping for a better overall performance. Absolutely. Ben Tarnowski says, do you think Notre Dame should follow Ohio State's lead, hiring a former player as wide receivers coach, Brian Hartline, and try to hire a guy like Golden Tate, Jeff Samardzija, or Michael Floyd? I don't if just because to hire an alum, you have to hire an alum if he can coach. That's the key. If there's a guy out there that could coach receivers and coach him at a high level, and he happens to be an alum and a famous alum like the guys you mentioned, sure, go for it. I totally makes sense. I don't think, however, that I'm just going to hire a guy just because he's alum and then hope that he can play. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a different story for me. I think you've got to prove that you can be a good player. And, Brian Hartline spent a year as a GA at Ohio State and then just immediately became the receivers coach. And as I've said before, if you got the chops, you got the chops. He was playing in the NFL until 2015. By 2017, he was a GA. By 2018, he was a receivers coach. So can it happen? Absolutely. Would I be opposed to a Golden Tate or a Samardzija or a Michael Floyd or, I think Michael Floyd might be a little bit challenging because of some of his off the field issues that he's had. But if there's a guy like that Raymond McKnight, Mo Stovall, whatever, I don't care. Sure, I'd be fine with that. I think there's advantages to that, but he has to be able to coach and recruit. And we've seen that get into problems before where you bring in former coaches, some couldn't coach, some couldn't recruit, some couldn't do either. And you have to be real careful with that. But I would always be intrigued by an alum coming. If he can coach, that's the key. Brandon says, I was going to message you and ask you about when that game day hour was going to come up, what was coming out. Keep looking for it to pop up, and that will come up today for sure. Liam Gaming, hit the like button. Definitely do that. Brandon says 52-20 in favor of Notre Dame. KMA Preston, haven't seen you in a while, Preston. Glad to see you in the show. 38-14. Ooh, just got bumped down. Here we go. Tom McDonald, Brian, don't know if you would agree, but poor tackling, in my opinion, has been a consistent issue with Kelly's teams. What do you attribute this to? I don't think it's been a consistent theme with Kelly's teams. I think they've kind of had some years where they were better than others. Last year, not a good tackling team. I think the 2018 team was a very good tackling team. I think that when you look at 2012, that was a really good tackling team until the Alabama game. Last year, not a good tackling team. This year, for one game, they weren't a good tackling team. I think why? I think it's different things. It's how much preparation are you doing in camp? Are you doing enough live hitting? Are you doing enough extra tackling drills that maybe aren't involving the hitting? Because again, you can't just tackle and take to the ground every day. You're only going to increase your chances for injuries if you're doing live tackling every single day. I don't think in today's era that's a wise decision. So I'm okay not doing that. I think that what I would like to see, however, is I would like to see. I think part of it too is I think Mike Elko and Clark Lee helped really change the tackling because it was something that they practiced all the time. And I think sometimes when you have a veteran team as a coach, and we've all fallen victim to this from time to time, you can kind of I'm trying to think of how to say this. You can kind of get into situations where you take some of the simpler things for granted because you think, hey, I got a really veteran football team. I don't need to worry about, having this or worrying about that or coaching that as much as normal because those guys should know that. And I think that can be a mistake. I'm not saying that has happened this year, but I think that has happened in the past at times. So I think that's something that they need to improve. Kenny Moore with the score prediction, 44-17. Irish control the game, but Toledo gets a late score too. John Climax is 42-31 in favor of Notre Dame. That would be an interesting game. If Marcus Freeman gave up over 30 points in back-to-back games, that would be very concerning. Mr. I always get your name wrong. Kostrub brought my dad into the IB family. Shout out to Bill. Bill, thank you for joining us, and I'm sorry I keep getting your last name wrong. I know you've even told us one time how to say it, but I just messed it up again, so I apologize. But welcome to your dad, Bill, to the channel, and then, of course, welcome back to you. David Knight, I met Terry Hanner at the linebacker and had a shot of Crown Royal with him. All righty. David Knight, welcome aboard, Bill. Kenny Moore says, Toledo better not score 31. Wiesta, is that what that is? There we go. 48-21 Irish. Kevin says, Coach D, do you think that Notre Dame would hold back again in the second half like they did Saturday? I hope not. I would hope that Brian Kelly say, hey, look, this game especially, we got to really dig deep. We got to really bear down and make this a game where we're going to push what we did last week so far in the system that we're going to kind of maybe go on the opposite side. We're going to punch another extra score or two on, with no disrespect to Toledo, but I got to do what's best for my team. I think that's the key. Peter Bosco, how would you organize the line for Toledo looking forward to the next 8 weeks, given the Fisher injury? Part of this is I'd have to see it in practice, I think, but what I would do is I would sit down with Jarrett Patterson and talk to him. What are your thoughts about maybe moving out to tackle? Do you want to give it a shot? And if he's unwilling to do it, then I don't worry about it. I would strongly consider, obviously, you give Carmody that chance. I would consider, hey, are we going to, do you give Andrew Kristofic a chance? Do you move Josh Lugg over there and put somebody else at right tackle? Do you have the right players in Carmody and Lugg, but maybe one, the veteran needs to go on the other side? I think those are all things I'd look into. Is Tosh Baker ready to play? Doesn't look like he is right now. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully you can expedite his growth as well. But the first thing I would do is I'd talk to Jarrett Patterson about possibly moving out to tackle. That's what I would do. Chance done 42-10, Notre Dame. Spa boys close first quarter, but Notre Dame will wear them down and play up to their potential. In this one, 45-21. Ryan Olenek says, my question is, if Notre Dame theoretically stayed the same as they were in the first game, play calls, mistakes, and all, what would you think their record would be at the end of the year? Thanks, Brian. Probably 9-3. If they played like they did on Monday night every week, probably 9-3. Especially because, the whole calling off the dogs thing, because you're letting the team come back. Yeah, you're gonna drop a couple. But I still feel like Notre Dame was pretty much in control of that game, with the exception of two big plays for the first 2.5 quarters until they went away from what was working for them. And Ryan says, also, I don't get to make the live show too often, but I'm stoked to be here today. Go Irish, and we are happy to have you here, Ryan. Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. Tom McDonald says, Brian, would you agree that the running game needs more misdirection and trap plays? No, I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think you need trap plays, not in this type of offense. I think they ran some counters early and the line got blown up. Counters require a physical line. You can't be a good misdirection team if your line's getting blown back. And because it's going to bounce your pull. So what happens is essentially, and I wish I could draw this up, but essentially you need strong down blocks to the call side. You need a strong push. Then your guard's going to come and kick out, and then you're going to get a wrap, right? So you're going to just get that right up in there, and you're just going to counter and bam, hit it right up in there. If your line's getting blown back, your pullers are back, and a lot of times what happens is one of your pullers is going to get kind of caught up in the wash. So, whether your tackle's blocking down, or your tackle's base blocking, and you're wrapping up inside, or your tackle's also going down and it's a little bit of a wider counter. Either way, you need movement at the point of attack in order to run the counter. If you don't get that movement at the point of attack and you're stalemating or getting come back, then you can't get the angles you need on the downhill counters and the misdirections. I think that I get where you're coming from, Tom. I think that's a little bit of an older mindset. That's why I think things like RPOs, things like reverses, I think those things are the type of counters, not counters in the counter play, which is a misdirection, but more so, counters schematically to that is if they want to be good and if they want to kind of load the box, and we're just going to pull it and we're going to get it outside. I think that the way that the zone can be properly designed, there's a lot of things you do. The zone by its nature can be a misdirection. If you're going to come this way, then I'm cutting back this way. You know what I mean? Do I think they need a couple more wrinkles in the run game? Yeah, I think so. But again, when you can't execute your basic inside and outside zone concepts, when you can't execute a basic counter, which again, they ran like 3 counters on Saturday and they all got blown up. The running backs having to bounce outside. Why go back to that? There are no options there. A trap play is very similar. A trap, you're going to run a quick trap, or kind of like how Oklahoma runs it. They kind of get that little wrap, that quick this quick tackle pull, tackle wrap. If you're going to run things like that, again, it requires movement at the line of scrimmage. If Notre Dame doesn't get better movement on Saturday, it doesn't matter what they call. It's going to require better play up front. Sean Finn, were you surprised by how many plays Jack Coan made last weekend? Felt like he was painted as a game manager coming in. He was not painted as that on this channel. Vince and I have been telling you all for months that Jack Coan was a very good quarterback. He was given that label because that's what the Wisconsin offense does, not what Jack Coan does. He completed almost 70% of his passes in his 1 year at Wisconsin. I wrote an article 5 months ago. About 5 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, where I said then Jack Coan, and this was based off Wisconsin film, that Jack Coan would improve Notre Dame's run game or deep ball game. I mean, I've talked about this. He is a willing deep ball thrower. And I made that argument that they're going to be better throwing the deep ball with Jack Coan than they were with Ian Book, even though I think Ian Book has a stronger arm. So Sean, no, I'm not like tooting my own horn, but I mean, this is, if you're a longtime listener to this channel, this should not be what we saw from Jack Coan on Sunday. Should not have been anything surprising you. It should have said, hey, yep, that's what IB's been talking about all summer. Yep, that's the guy they've been talking about. Do I expect him to complete 74% of his passes every week? No. But do I expect him to be a guy that can make plays with his arm every week? Yeah. But him making plays with his arm is simply get the ball to your receivers. Let them go do the athletic things. Just get it out there and get it on time. And I've always felt he was capable of that. Not always. I didn't love Jack Coan coming out of high school. I think as he developed at Wisconsin, he became a lot better at those things. Jeffrey DeMonk, my bowling friend. My prediction is 48-24. Notre Dame 48, Toledo 24. Let's go Irish. Kevin says, what's the deal with Sebo being out for 4 games? Sebo got into a little accident thing where he fled the scene of an accident this summer, and I think it's about that. Michelangelo, if Notre Dame runs a 3-down defensive front, Notre Dame 35, Toledo 31. Again, I'll say it again. Notre Dame ran a 3-down front after they had a big lead. Okay, they did not run it exclusively as their offense on Saturday. Michelangelo says, what wide receivers are out of eligibility? Technically, none of them. I mean, technically, Avery Davis, I believe, could come back for a 6th year next year. I believe, because he redshirted 1 year. This is his 5th year, but because last year didn't count because of COVID, he could come back next year. I don't think that he will. All the receivers have eligibility to return next year. I just don't think all of them will. Brett Gallagher says, were Golden Tate and other Weiss receivers well coached, or were they just good athletes? They were mainly just good athletes. Charlie's teams did not coach well as far as the fundamentals of how to play the game. Dynasty ISP, Notre Dame 30, Toledo 24. Paul Curry says, new subscriber to Irish Breakdown. Thank you very much for that, Paul. Who are the premier receiver coaches who may be available for next year if the Irish decide to make a change? I'll tell you what, Paul, we'll get to that if it comes. We talked about this a little bit last night. I'm not super comfortable with that. The one guy I've always said is, look, I'm a huge Curtis Johnson fan. He's the receiver coach for the Saints. I would always, if I was Brian Kelly, if I was any receiver coach in college football, or any head coach of college football, that's the first call I would always make. And I'd want to find out if he's, willing to recruit. That would be my concern, but I think he's a great coach. But if we get to the point where they're looking for a new receivers coach, I'll certainly have some names. But there's a lot of good receiver coaches out there. You just got to be a teacher. You got to be able to be, develop relationships with your kids, and you got to be a recruiter. You got to be a good recruiter. Kastrub, I will try to remember that, and I appreciate that. Appreciate your patience. Chile is looking for Notre Dame to get on the right track this weekend. Chile has the Irish 50 and the Rockets at 10. That would be a really good weekend, Chile, because, again, I think this is a good Toledo team. If Notre Dame wins like that, if your prediction is even close to being accurate, that would be a very good start, very, very good start to the season. Start to the season. Paul Rose, 49-20 Irish. Mr. Kastrub says, don't worry, you're not the only one that struggles with my name. Doesn't hurt my feelings. Well, I appreciate your patience, but I still like to be correct. Joseph Salvatore says, Brian, in your honest opinion, how bad are the injuries for Notre Dame's prospects this year? I think I'm most concerned about losing Fisher. I mean, I'm always going to give you my honest opinion. I don't ever not give you my honest opinion. The Fisher injury is bad because I think he was their most talented lineman. It's going to hurt, but I also don't think that they're just putting some bum out there. I think Michael Carmody has got some talent. I think there's some other options that they have there. I think there's some things that they can do where they're going to be able to survive. Again, you're O-line U, right? You're supposedly O-line U. At least you were under Harry Heastan and with the guys you just put in the NFL. But you shouldn't one injury should not ruin your season. You know, I mean, we saw last year Alabama lost Landon Dickerson, their All-American center, in the SEC championship game, and they went out and won their next two games in impressive fashion. You know, we've seen this before. You should be able to survive it if you've recruited and developed and coached the way that you're supposed to at Notre Dame, then you should be okay. 9911 Brian says, if Patterson is moved to left tackle, who would be left guard? I still think, well, I don't know if you necessarily would move Zeke Correll back to center. If you think he could be there, then that's fine. But my thought was, to your question, Brian, is I would put Carmody inside. If you think Carmody's your next best lineman, right? That's what you should do, is who's your next best lineman. Assuming that next best lineman allows you to get the best five, which isn't always the case. Sometimes you got to go to number 7 or 8 just as far as who's better, because 6 and 7 may not be able to play the position that's open, or you may not have someone that's able to move to that position. So I would, if you think Kristofic is that guy, then you can move him to guard, give him that chance. If you want to put Correll at center, maybe you leave Kristofic at center and move Correll and keep Correll at left guard. I think I'm always going to be allowing Rocco Spindler to battle for that job, obviously, but I would look at giving Michael Carmody a shot at guard in that instance. But I don't think Notre Dame's going to do it. I think they're just going to put Carmody in the game, in my opinion. Michael Collins says, Vince said if Watts is moved to safety next year, he wouldn't play much. Why would that be? I would think he would have would be ample opportunity. And who wasn't the move received well by? Watts, his family, Reese. All of the above. So I don't necessarily agree with Vince. I think Xavier Watts could be a good receiver at Notre Dame. I mean, good safety at Notre Dame. I do. I think he could be a guy that's at least in the rotation and would play more. So I don't necessarily agree with Vince on that. I just don't like the way they're going about it. I do think he could play safety, but the problem is next year moving to safety is he's going to lose a whole year of development at the position. He's not going to be a full-time rover. I just don't see it. You're also, Jack Kaiser's got multiple years of eligibility left. You're recruiting Jalen Sneed and Nolan Ziegler to play that position. So it's not a full-time move. He doesn't have the body to be a full-time rover, in my opinion. But I do think he can play safety. But now he's going to go into his junior year with not having ever played it before, or having not played it since high school. So I think from a development standpoint, I'm concerned about that. But I disagree with Vince a little bit. I do think Xavier Watts would have a chance to play. I don't think it would just be automatically he's not going to play. My issues are much deeper than he'll never play there. I think that was Vince is just kind of fired up about this because he really likes him as a receiver, as do I. I think that had more to do with it. Kevin says, Coach D, what are your thoughts on Reese as the coordinator? I think you guys are referring to the coordinator. If that's what that means, I don't know. But if you're talking about him as the coordinator, look, Tommy Reese right now as the coordinator is not an issue for me. I think he called a great game last week. I'm curious to see what he does this week. Continue that, but I think he called a great game last week. Paul Hamilton, could Jordan Battel play linebacker and play it well? I think so. He just has to be able to play. I think that's the bigger issue. Rob Didoff says, Brian, is it just me or does Jack Cohn remind you of Joe Flacco too? Not really. I think he's a little bit more, he's more mobile than Joe was. And Joe kind of had a big arm when he was young. I don't think Jack has a big arm. I think Jack is more about timing and anticipation and accuracy. I don't think he has a cannon, in my opinion. And I think Joe had a pretty strong downfield arm, in my opinion. Yes. Brian says, Jeff Quinn is special teams coach. Let Brian Polian get an O-line coach that can better coach. And he would love to see Rocco Spindler playing left guard. Thank you for that, Brian. Tom McDonald, thanks, Brian, for addressing my 2 questions today. Great insight. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the questions, and I hope that those answers satisfied you. David sharing. David saying, okay, Brian, in high school, my junior year, I had a bit too many personal fouls and the coaches let me play, but they made me run wind sprints and bleacher climbs with my teammates. Why can't they do that with the players who have committed an offense? Well, David, I think part of it is that's a football mistake. These guys are not in trouble for football mistakes. And I think sometimes you have to let players know that football can be taken away from you. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, football can be taken away from you. And sometimes that's necessary, in my opinion. Sean Finn says, first-time listener, thanks for the answer. Okay, Sean, if you're a first-time listener, that's very good to know, because what I would encourage you to do, you can do two things. Number one is you can just search our channel for some of the Jack Cohn stuff that we had. Number two is if you want to shoot me an email, I can send you some of the stuff that we wrote about Jack. So obviously, Irish Breakdown is our website. I'm going to put the banner up here for the website. That is our website, irishbreakdown.com. The message board is the thing that you saw earlier, but we've had a lot of articles. I can find that article for you and send it to you so you have an idea of kind of what we do. But yeah, this is something that we've been telling people. And so if this is your first time listening, I'll be honest about something too. I have said when I first heard that Notre Dame was getting Jack Cohn, I was not thrilled. I wasn't super happy about it because I casually watched Wisconsin like you did, and he never I was like, wow, blew me away. It wasn't until I really studied the film and dove into the film that I started getting a greater appreciation for Jack Cohn and what he brought to the table. And why I think he could benefit Notre Dame. It's also partly because of my faith in the receiving core that I really think this is a good group of pass catchers, and they just need a smart quarterback that's going to get the ball where it needs to go to, let them go make plays, and we saw that on Sunday night. Sean Hunter has Notre Dame predicted to win 35-17. Omar Austin asks, are there seriously no rumblings among Notre Dame staff about the wide receiver position? How is that possible? How can that many people at one position transfer, leaving you that thin and no one notices? It's easy to do that. Look, a lot of Notre Dame fans on Twitter and some in this chat are the same way. Well, it's the players. It's clearly Michael Young's fault and Jordan Johnson's fault and Jay Brunell's fault, Kendall Abdul-Rahman's fault, Micah Jones's fault, Xavier Watts' fault, Lawrence Keys' fault. It's clearly the fault of all these guys who haven't done what they needed to do. And yes, even though it is at one position, it's still clearly their fault. Even though this is happening nowhere else, it's definitely their fault. I think that happens so much. Austin Schomburg says, why did my question get skipped? I don't know what question you're referring to, Austin. If you're a new listener to this channel, StreamYard only allows us to have so many questions at a time, and sometimes we get bumped down, and whatever questions were above the bump get lost. So you're more than welcome to put it back in, and I'll answer it. But we rarely just skip questions. Some questions we've either answered before or they're inappropriate. We've seen very few of those. So if you want me to answer it, ask it again. But that's just kind of what happens sometimes. Matthew Southgate's looking for a big bounce back weekend. He's going Notre Dame 63, Toledo 21. Craig Sebring says Notre Dame 45, Toledo 21. Brian's pick for the line would be Josh Lugg, Rocco Spindler, Zeke Carell, Michael Carmody, and Jarrett Patterson across the board. So Lugg at left tackle, Patterson at right tackle, Carmody at right guard, Spindler at left guard, and Carell at center. Or he would go with Patterson at left tackle, Spindler at left guard. I think he meant 52 there because I don't think he's advocating for Quinn Murphy being the center. 52, and then Carmody there. So you're taking Kane Madden out, Brian, I would assume, in that situation. Kostrub. Okay, I think I got it right there. Nolan Esparza, Toledo has so many returning starters, not used to that at Notre Dame. Is that a more common thing at MAC schools since they're typically more developmental type programs? Well, part of that too is Nolan, is that you're in a situation because of COVID and unlimited scholarships this year. A lot of those guys got brought back. Like for example, Jonathan Jones. I think Jonathan Jones would have otherwise been out of eligibility. I believe. I'll look at this here real quick. I'm going to pull him up. Yeah, so Jonathan Jones was a class of 2016 player, which meant 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Those was his 5 years. He should have been done after last year. But because of COVID, he is back now for a sixth year. So I think that's part of it too. Is like all those MAC teams, like a lot of those MAC teams have tons of starters coming back. I've read some. I was watching the UCLA LSU game, and there was something like there's a ton of 6-year seniors at UCLA because they would bring those guys back, which helps them. Well, you can't do that most years. That's not really an option for you in most seasons because I think the COVID thing has helped them with a lot of these guys. Just got booted again. Let's get back up here. Mr. Kohlstrup, love the show and all the analysis. Awesome to take so many questions. Thank you for that. Appreciate that. Usually we're not doing this during the week, but I just figured people are fired up and want to kind of get their points out. So I wanted to give them that opportunity. Mark 1 says, thanks for what you do. You are welcome, Mark. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing here. Carmine Burr says, I'm hoping for 48-0 Notre Dame win, but expecting a 35-27 game. That would surprise me. I'm not going to lie to you. That would definitely surprise me. Kyle Dolan, Brian, point blank question. Do you have any confidence that the issues at receiver and offensive line will be fixed? No, I don't. Chad Williams says, if the game is in doubt heading into the fourth quarter, will you be concerned for the remainder of the season? It depends on why. It would depend on why the game is close. Yeah, it would depend on why the game was close. Would I be concerned? A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think a little bit. Yep. Dallas Glenn says, don't know if you've touched on this. You literally just plugged the website, but does BYU opting for, I don't understand what that means. But does BYU opting for a Power 5 instead of independence affect Notre Dame's chances of going to the ACC at all? No. BYU and Notre Dame aren't affiliated in any way as independents. Notre Dame, if Notre Dame was the only independent in college football, it wouldn't affect them at all. They don't care. They don't care. Jonathan Kazmarek says, I fully expecting Notre Dame to demolish Toledo and Purdue. I would hope so. I think Purdue might put up a little bit better test, but Notre Dame should win both of those games convincingly. Adam Blair says, hey, Brian, who are some seniors this year who have eligibility and can come back next season? Well, really, everyone except Kurt Hinish and Caden Madden could technically come back next year because of COVID. They're not all going to. And what I mean by that is just everybody has an additional year of eligibility. Caden Madden is in his 6th year. Kurt Hinish is in his 5th season, but he's played 4. Whereas Tariq Bray, if a guy he never redshirted. If he had redshirted as a freshman, then Kurt Hinish technically could come back next year. But he's going to play his 5th season this year. But everybody else, Jack Cohn also does not have eligibility. I believe everybody else of the position players is out of eligibility. Jonathan Dorr does not have eligibility coming back among the specialists, but everybody else does. Donald Richardson, I'm coming to the game on Saturday. What is the best way to get there from Chicago? 80-90 is the way that I've always gone. Lee Gannon, Notre Dame 27-24. That would surprise me a little bit. I'm going to be honest with you. John A1, when is the last time Notre Dame scored 60? The last time they scored 60 was the second game of the 2019 season. They scored 66 against New Mexico. Kevin says, Coach D, can we get IB Nation swag at the tailgate? So I am not going to have any swag on this tailgate because honestly, I don't know how it's going to go. I don't want to go. I mean, look, I have a business to run. I have a family to take care of. I don't want to go out and buy gear and food for 100 people and 10 people show up, 5 people show up. So probably not going to have anything like that. If it goes well this time and we have another tailgate against USC, which, I mean, right now, based on the number of people that have said they're coming to this tailgate, I doubt we do something for USC. just doesn't look like there's going to be really anybody there. But if we end up doing something for USC, I would probably get some stuff then. I'd probably get some hats and some shirts and some things like that. But right now, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But you can always get stuff from the merch store. Definitely. I'm going to try to find a couple more predictions. Mr. Kostrub, Notre Dame is going to win 52-21. Also, is the team as fast as they looked against Florida State? Yes. Yes. We talked about this summer. I had an intel piece during fall camp where I talked to someone. It was an outsider, someone that had kind of been at Notre Dame, had been at Notre Dame in past years, almost every year has had a chance to see Notre Dame in person. And he said, told a friend of mine, he's like, this is the fastest Notre Dame team I've seen under Brian Kelly. And it wasn't close. That's saying something because he was around the 2015 team. John Keevers, do you see Kelly making aggressive staff decision moves with receiver and O-line as he did with our DC? No, I do not. Because the DC situation is a guy left. He didn't fire Clark Lee. Clark Lee got a head coaching job. He wasn't going to fire Clark Lee. Clark Lee was doing a great job in a lot of ways. So I don't see those guys leaving. I don't know if Jeff Quinn was an analyst here for multiple years. Nobody hired him away. No one's going to try to hire him away now. John Kesmerick, the reason for my optimism is that it was week 1 on the road against a much improved Florida State team. OU allowed 35 at home to Tulane, and OSU surrendered 31 to Minnesota and was down at half. And I agree. I think some people are overreacting to the first game. Absolutely. And acting as if like it was a close game the whole time. Notre Dame was in control of that game. They made some decisions that I think weren't they just weren't smart moves, in my opinion. You change those decisions and this game's not competitive, and I think we have a whole different outlook on the season. You put that team away instead of letting them get back in the game, we have a completely different outlook, in my opinion, because that's what we have. We have one game of data, and so people are going to react and overreact to that. That's what's going to happen. Paul Rose says MTA can't come back either, correct? Actually, I believe he could because he took a red shirt in 2018. So Myron got hurt. If you remember, Myron got hurt against Michigan. And so that made him in 2019 a redshirt sophomore. In 2020, it made him a redshirt junior, and in this year made him a redshirt senior. So he actually could. So he played in 17, played in 19, he played in 20, which doesn't count, and he played in 21. So technically, he could take advantage. The reason Kurt Hinish doesn't have that ability is Kurt played all 4 years. He played as a freshman in 17, he played in 18, he played in 19, he played in 20. So this is his extra season. Myron actually technically has another season of eligibility. There might be a guy or two here and there, but I don't think so. If anyone that's had a red shirt that's a fifth-year player that took a red shirt, basically COVID didn't count, so they have 2 red shirts. So what with Kurt, the reason Kurt and Jonathan Dorr could come back this year, and even though they're in the same class as Myron, is because they didn't take any red shirts. COVID was their red shirt. That's the difference. I hope that clears things up. Ethan Bodner says, first time in a live show. Thank you for joining us, Ethan. Love all the hard work you guys do and love hearing your insight. Well, I appreciate that very, very much. Michael Collins says, if Notre Dame moved on from Alexander, would they lose any of their current commits? Why is Kelly more loyal to Quinn than Denbrock, who he let move on? Unless I misunderstood how he left. Okay, couple things. Number one, I don't think it would affect the receiver recruit commits because I think that has as much to do with Tommy Rees as anything. I also, as far as why he's more loyal to Quinn than Denbrock, he was with Quinn for much longer. Jeff Quinn was his O-line coach and coordinator at Grand Valley for 10 years. He was his offensive line coach at Central Michigan. He was technically the offensive line coach at Cincinnati. And that's 6 more years. And then, of course, he's been with him here. So I think there's a loyalty there there's a relationship that goes back a lot further than his professional relationship with Mike Denbrock. But also, Mike Denbrock was part of a staff that basically failed. And he had to get a lot of those guys. He had to get rid of a lot of those guys. Also, Kelly wanted Denbrock to come back. He wanted he wasn't going to keep him as his coordinator. That's the difference. Jeff Quinn wasn't the coordinator, so it's a little bit of a different situation. But I understand why you're asking the question. It's just a little bit of a different situation. John A1 says 45-17 for Notre Dame. Jim Bob says 38-24 for Notre Dame. Brandon says, I think there's going to be more people in the tailgate than you expect. Maybe, but like I said, I mean, I've asked people to tell me if they're coming or not, and not many people have told me if they're coming or not. So it'd be cool, but people can come. It's just, I just may not have a lot of food. That's all. But I'll still be there and hanging out. So if more people come, that'd be great. And we'll have a better idea if we decide to do another one. But I'm not anticipating many people coming. I'm anticipating like maybe 10 or 15 people showing up. But we'll see. Zach Garza says, heading up to South Bend in the morning because of the long drive. Can't wait. Drive safe, please. Jim Bob says, you should see how fast some of Toledo's are. Go look at the 100-meter times. We talked about this yesterday, Jim Bob. We think Toledo has a very good skill on offense. And we talked about that yesterday. We talked about how they've got a kid that transferred from Georgia who's having trouble getting into the lineup. I did. Yes, I did. Mark Lecluse. I hope I'm getting that right. I'm sorry if I got that wrong. If you want to let me know how to pronounce your name, I will try to get it correct next time. New channel member. What are the top 2 things to do to correct, to improve this defense? I think number 1 is just get them to understand you have to play under control, right? I think a lot of the missed tackles were guys not playing under control. That can happen when you have a really fast, aggressive defense. Guys can kind of play out of control. And I think that's a little bit of what happened on Sunday. So I think that's number 1. And then part of that is focusing on proper tackling form. Because if you tackle properly, you're going to understand the need to come to balance and strike and wrap up and those kind of things. I think those 2 things go hand in hand. And I think the second thing really, Mark, is just experience. Like, again, this was game 1 in a system that's much different than the one they've run in past years. So they're still learning a lot, and so there's still calls that they're going to make, so like the 89-yard touchdown, we all saw DJ Brown's mistake, but the other mistake was the whole line is slanting this way, except Riley Mills, who slants inside, Lecluse. So I thank you for that. But you have one guy makes that mistake. I don't know if he makes that mistake in Clark Lee's defense because they didn't ask him to do as much of that sort of exotic stuff. So I think it's just experience in the system. And then number 2, which means, and what that means, Mark, is that's you continue to teach the fundamentals, the calls, get these right. You're now game 2, game 3, game 4. I don't believe in just one bad game or one bad stretch of a game and just throw everything out the window. But cleaning up those mistakes that comes from playing under control and then cleaning up mistakes that comes from experience in the system are the 2 things to me that are going to result in better play. But just believe in who you are, because when you guys were right on Sunday, you were really good and really dominant. And I think that's the thing you got to take away from it. Irish for life. Hey, IB Nation, better late than never. God bless. Glad that you're with us. Antoine Porsche Rideau says, if you take away the 89-yard run and 60-yard pass, the score would have been 38-6. Take away big plays, the defense can hold teams to 13, 60 points. That's why I'm not freaking out. I'm not, Antoine. Yes, there's things you got to clean up. No doubt. There's some players that maybe need to not play as much, but there's some rotation things needed corrected. But I'm not freaking out. They're going to be fine on defense, in my opinion. They really are. Brandon with the super chat. Thank you for that, Brandon. When recruits ask about the key situation, how does the staff possibly explain this and save face? I feel they could have explained the other situation. I think what they'll say is, hey, look, kid was a talented player, but he was having a hard time getting on the field, and we're going to play the best players, and that's how good we are at receiver is, a guy like him can't get in the field. I think that's what you'll do. Mr. Kosher, 2 days ago was my 2-year engagement anniversary. Got engaged at the Grotto during Ball State weekend. Okay, so you got engaged Ball State weekend, which was a W. So hopefully we have another MAC W this weekend, and that's quite a long engagement, my friend. So good luck as you prepare to for your nuptials whenever they might be. Adam Blair, do you think Kyle Hamilton could be the number 1 pick? I doubt it, not because he may not be the best player, but he plays a position that's devalued by many in the NFL. But part of that, too, is going to depend on who's picking and what their needs are. But I'd be a little surprised by that. There's been like 2 or 3 top 5 safeties in the last 15, 20 years. It just is not a position that is valued as much as, a left tackle or defensive end or quarterback. Christopher LaFaro, 45-24 Notre Dame, looking at Florida State in their schedule. Can you see them winning 8 or 9 games this season? 8 or 9, and this win looking a lot better. It's possible. We talked a little bit about Florida State. I definitely think they're a bowl team. I think they can win 6 to 8 games. I think their schedule is a little bit challenging. Jacksonville State this weekend, that should be a win. They have home games against Louisville and Syracuse and UMass. That's that should be 4 wins. They have 2 home games back to back against NC State and Miami. Let's just assume they split those. That puts them at 5-2, right? And then you've got at Wake Forest, at North Carolina, at Clemson, at BC, and at Florida. You'd have to either sweep NC State and Miami at home. Well, let's just say they do that to make it even show how more challenging their schedules. Let's say they win the rest of their home games. So they beat Jacksonville State, Louisville, Syracuse, UMass, NC State, Miami. They go 6-1 at home, including the loss to Notre Dame. You got at Wake Forest, at North Carolina, at Clemson, at BC, at Florida. You're going to have to win 2 to 3 of those games, and that's going to be hard. Even if you beat Wake Forest next weekend, let's say they do that, which is possible, you'd have to beat 1 or 2 of North Carolina, Clemson, BC, and Florida. That's going to be tough. If they win 9 games this year, Christopher, that's going to be a heck of a season for Mike Norvell, especially since they already have a loss under their belt. They'd have to go 9-2 against a schedule that has North Carolina on the road, Clemson on the road, BC on the road, Florida on the road, NC State at home, who looked really good to start the season, and Miami at home. That'd be tough sledding, but that would be one heck of a season for Florida State, in my opinion. Brandon says, by the way, Brian, I'll be at the tailgate for Purdue. Well, then that's all that matters, buddy. So I appreciate that. David Knight says we can still go 12-0. The best adjustments are game 1 and 2. I have no doubt that they can go still 12-0. My prediction hasn't changed. Again, I think people are somewhat overreacting to they made mistakes in the opener, but they are correctable mistakes. There's nothing that happened in the opener that can't be corrected. And there's some things that were really good in the opener that are going to allow them to overcome some of the errors where they're not necessarily an elite team. Omar Austin says, you can put this up. I'm a fierce liberal. So Notre Dame treats the wide receiver position like the U.S. treats the Southern Porter since the 70s. People just come and go and nothing gets done. That's funny. That's funny, especially coming from a liberal friend of mine. So that's very well done, Omar. I appreciate that. But it's also very true. Oh, man. Paul Rose says, I think Notre Dame keeps Toledo to 3 points for the first 2.5 quarters, and then Notre Dame gets some backups, and then Toledo scores a couple times from there. That would be a great performance because, again, I'm telling you, this is a good Toledo offense. I like this Toledo offense. I really do. If Notre Dame holds them to 3 points for the first 2.5 quarters, that's one heck of a defensive performance because this is a really good offense, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Omar, you had me tearing up a little bit there. John Keever says, I'm coming to the USC game, no question. He says, I got married in 2019. Okay, so I misread that. I thought you were saying like that day is going to be your 2-year anniversary engagement. Like you're not married yet, so you're still celebrating anniversary, engagement anniversaries because you don't have a wedding anniversary. So that's my bad on that. But congratulations on the nuptials and I didn't get engaged in a Notre Dame game, but I have shared a story before. I knew I was going to marry my wife, now wife. I knew I was going to marry her because of a Notre Dame game. We were just kind of dating for a couple month or so. We had kind of made this long trip, and part of that long trip was going to the Notre Dame Duke game in 2007. It's cold, rainy, miserable. She had told me she didn't dislike football. She didn't like football. She'd go to a game and watch it and enjoy herself, but she didn't really watch games on TV. Didn't have a favorite team or anything like that. So we're at the Notre Dame games, miserable day. Jimmy throws a TD pass. I think it was David Grimes. It's now like 28-7. It's like 4 or 5 minutes left. I'm miserable. I'm cold. I'm wet. It just sucks. It's the middle of a terrible season. So I look at her and I say, hey, and thinking she's probably, if I'm cold and miserable, and I'm a Notre Dame probably like hating life right now. So I'm being the nice, boyfriend. And I look at her and said, "Hey, you ready to go?" I'm okay. I mean, the game's over. Basically, they're going to win. You ready to go? And she looks at me like I just said something about her mother. She goes, "What are you, nuts? There's still 5 minutes left in the game." And that was it for me. That was the final straw for me. I said, once that happened, I was like, "Yep, this is the woman. God made this woman for me, and she's going to have to be my wife." So I proposed to her that December around Christmas, and not on Christmas, but around Christmas, a couple days after Christmas, up in the mountains. So but it was so similar. Somewhat similar connection. Yours was a little bit more official, so that's pretty cool. You say an NCQB will be the first pick based on Trubisky's success. Sarcasm alert. Oh boy. Garth Cassidy says, Brian, if you were an offensive coordinator at Florida State, who do you start at quarterback for the rest of the season? Milton or Travis? Both. I'm playing both of them because I don't know if my wife remembers that story. That is my wife, by the way. She did say that. Who would I start at quarterback, Garth? And this is a good question. I would say I'd play both. Number one, I don't think Mackenzie Milton's going to be able to hold up over the course of a season. I'm really concerned about that. I'm really concerned because of the knee injury. I'd be afraid that he wouldn't be able to hold up. And I think that you got to have Jordan Travis's athleticism in the lineup somehow. I would play both. And the longer that Mackenzie shows he can stay healthy and be similar to his old self, I would play him more, and then Jordan would become my change of pace. But early on, I'd have Mackenzie as my change of pace guy, simply because he's got to prove to me that he's healthy. And I don't want to put him in a situation where, he's going to have another long-term injury. Kevin says, Coach D, you just wanted to snuggle to get warm. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Brian Dimbo says, after last weekend, triple overtime, Toledo wins with a safety. Brian Kelly streaks on the field. I got to move on from that. Oh, God. David, you just went all out on that. Ms. Kallstrom, my wife bought the tickets for us just a couple months into dating, knew it was the real deal at that point in time. Yes. So I couldn't end on Brian Denbo's comment. I had to bring something back. Oh, boy. Irish AJ, my wife used to be an Ohio State fan and have since converted her to Notre Dame diehard. She loathes Ohio State. Now that is called being a great husband at that point in time. If you could get her out of those dark, evil days and get her into the light, it's like, that's as big of a miracle as Luke Skywalker getting Darth Vader back, at the end and having him turn against the Emperor. That's how wonderful that is. So that's really well done. So I want to thank everybody for being part of, and my wife that loathes Ohio State as well. She's very happy with that decision. All right, so that's going to do it for today's show. Thank everyone for being with us today. Great crowd today, a lot going on. Make sure you check out the Irish Breakdown message board or the Irish Breakdown website, which you can see there at irishbreakdown.com. Also, make sure that you sign up for the message board, which you can also see there at boards@irishbreakdown.com. Built Bar, 10% off any Built Bar purchase, which I love. I'm a big supporter of Built Bar, the company. Also, the product is great. You can get 10% off all your entire purchase by using Irish Breakdown promo code. If you're someone who wants to get stuff from the merch, you can get the merch stuff down there as well. And look for it. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to see some of y'all. If you plan on coming to the game next weekend and being part of the tailgate, please let me know. Even if you can't do one of the polls, just shoot me a DM. I'm just trying to get a good head count so I can make sure if we're going to have 10 people there, 20 people there, that we're making sure that we have enough food for all of you. So please do that. Also, we've got the IB Yahoo Pick'em League. So a lot of people missed out on the first week. Your two lowest scores will get dropped. So if the confusion of last week and the games being changed, some games being, your picks being erased, don't let that affect you. That score will be dropped at some point in time. So make sure that you get your picks in. There are games tomorrow night. You got basically straight up and confidence points. So you pick the games, who you think is going to win, and then the games that you have the most confidence in, you give the highest confidence points, and that's how many points you get. So definitely check that out. So we got a lot going on in Irish Breakdown. I really appreciate everybody being part of what we're doing. I want to thank all of you for being with us today, and we will be back tomorrow with our Friday mailbag. So have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again soon.